meeting of October 27th, 2015. Anchorage Assembly meeting. Please do the roll call.
Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Mr. Steele.
Here.
Ms. Domboski.
Present.
Mr. Flynn. Present. Mr. Trainey.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Starr.
On the phone.
Ms. Johnston.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next time is Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Honeman, would you lead us, sir?
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. We have some minutes to approve. These are minutes of our meeting on September 29th, 2015, and October 13th, 2015. My thanks to the clerk's office for getting these to us on a timely basis. We actually remember those meetings. Thank you very much. I'll need a motion on both of
Move to
them.
approve September
Second.
29th.
Second.
What, ma'am? What was yours?
Move to approve the minutes of September 29th.
Okay.
And Mr. Honeman seconded it.
Honeman seconded it. Any questions? Any objection to approval of these items? Since Bill's on the line, let's start with him first.
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. Items approved. The next one would be our meeting of October 13th.
Move to approve the meetings of October 13th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from assembly members? Not seeing any. We'll vote on it. Mr. Starr, you're first.
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. Those minutes are approved. And again, thank you to the clerk's office. At one time, we would do them in batches of 4 or 5 months. So it's very nice to have it done this way. Thank you, Barbara.
And
Takes a
thanks-
lot of work.
Thanks to the staff, too.
I know. When I thank you, I'm thanking them too. Mayor's report, Mr. Mayor, sir.
Nothing to report. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Assembly Chair's report. A couple of things. On our agenda, we've got 2 items. Item 13A, the airport transfer. It's set for public hearing. But I'm told by Mr. Steele that what he wants to do is postpone that indefinitely. So if you're here to testify, keep in mind it's going to be postponed indefinitely is the wish of him and the administration. And then item 13B, that's set for public hearing. That's the Girdwood issue for a ballot, and that'll be postponed indefinitely by Ms. Johnston down there. So, Jennifer, any comments on that? I just want to let the public know we're going to postpone indefinitely.
We don't need to address the issue in as crisis mode because the troopers are staying along Seward Highway down to Portage through till July 1st.
Thank you, ma'am. So if you're here to testify on those 2 items, you might want to reconsider it. Okay, next one is committee reports. Mr. Hall, I'll start with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Only report I have is I am canceling both of my meetings for this month, both the ethics and election as well as the marijuana committee. We really have no work on those till, particularly the marijuana, until the state board finishes their work, and then we'll know what we need to do in concluding our work. So both of those meetings are canceled for this month. Marijuana committee will meet December 3rd.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston, ma'am?
No
comment?
report, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to mention that the cell tower working group is meeting at a slightly different time this week, and we're meeting at Thursday over at planning at 11 a.m. There was a conflict with another meeting, so we changed it. So 11 a.m. to noon, planning this coming Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Evans, sir.
No report, sir.
How about your alcoholism committee that you're working on?
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned? Okay. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The October Budget and Finance Committee meeting was canceled due to parking situation with AFN. And the November 19th meeting will be rescheduled because we're going to be at AML, some of us anyway. So I'll let everybody know sooner than later when that meeting will be rescheduled. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll let Mr. Steele give the AMATS report for last week. I was unable to be in attendance in person, so he and Mr. Peterson filled in, I'm sure, more than ably. And then I'll just defer to Ms. Domboski on her sartorial census finding today.
Ms. Domboski, ma'am.
Mr. Chair.
That looks good on you.
Thank you, thank you. For those in the audience, Mr. Flynn and I have had this long-standing friendly rivalry where earlier in the year when the Chugach Mustangs defeated the West Eagles, Mr. Flynn had to wear blue to the assembly meeting. And I am wearing my ceremonial orange today because our Mustangs, as many of us heard, we kind of got beat a little bit at the state championship. So congratulations to the West Eagles. That's what I'll say on that. And you got lucky, Mr. Flynn.
Which
it was a fluke.
Made him lucky.
Yeah, it was a fluke. We'll get you. Well, actually, we're going to be in a different conference next year. So I guess that's the nail in the coffin. Oh, gosh. Smack talking over here. Mr. Chair, by way of committee reports, the Community and Economic Development Committee did have a meeting on October 21st. During that time, the draft cell tower AO was presented by Mr. Wheeler and the cell tower working group. There was still a number of questions that they need to kind of finalize before they're ready for introduction, but I think it was a great first step. We are going to be posting it on the committee's webpage once it's I think a little bit more finalized, but right now there is a working draft out there. We did discuss for old business, there is a sign ordinance that's coming regarding menu ordering boards and screens. The department did identify a specific issue relating to height that they wanted to address, and the committee suggested we just do it all in one ordinance. So Erica McConnell will be working on that, and they'll present that particular issue to the committee, and then we'll have one cohesive ordinance for you relatively soon. The other thing is, though the Marijuana Committee is not meeting this month, it may be beneficial to those members who aren't on the Community and Economic Development Committee to come to our next meeting on November 4th, because it's our expectation that the administration through Erica McConnell will be presenting the draft AO for marijuana regulation, zoning, and all that kind of stuff at our next meeting. We really need to get on this because it has to go through planning and zoning, and we have to be ready for February. So it's crucial that this is getting introduced, pretty soon. Otherwise, we're going to run into a time issue. And then,
make sure we've got room for the amount of people that are going to care about that issue to be able to attend the meeting, because just the small room we're meeting in now, if you have 30 or 40 people, may be a little small.
Yeah. I'm not sure. We've brought this up, I thought, one other time, and we really didn't have as many. It seems that the cell tower group brings more of a crowd into our committee than others, but once it actually gets introduced, the ordinance, we'll have to have a work session on it as a body.
Bernie Hall and I were at the Community Federation meeting.
Yeah.
And he was telling them about it's going to be impacting community council, so you may have some of them start to show up.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So November 4th, our next meeting date is November 4th. That's when we'll discuss the draft AO on marijuana. And then the November 18th meeting, I'm going to be asking the Tom Davis to come in and present the land use plan map to the committee. So that's already in the works. It's already been circulating through the community, and I hear they've been getting a lot of good feedback. Planning and zoning is planning on having a couple extra meetings so they can take that community feedback and hopefully propose amendments to the land use plan map. But that will be something that every assembly member is going to want to pay close attention to because it will impact your community. And with that, Mr. Chair, I know I've been promising the Board of Ethics opinion, and it really will be on the agenda next meeting. Barbara's helping me draft the AM for that. But in the meantime, I would like to make a disclosure. Mr. Chairman.
I'm gonna miss these.
Thank you. By way of disclosure tonight, we have multiple budgets coming before us, the operating budget, the capital budget, and I'm sure there's others, but all have line items regarding AFD. My husband is an Anchorage firefighter. He's a captain at Station 11. He's also a member of IAFF Local 1264. His portion of his pay that he takes home is very small in comparison to the overall budget, and I don't believe I have a conflict, but I am required to make that disclosure so you and the public know, and I'll let you make a ruling on my participation.
Thank you. In the past, we've ruled, and we'll continue to rule, that it's not a conflict, it's de minimis, the amount. And my wife hates that when we deal with that, because my wife's a school teacher. And when I say her salary is de minimis to her overall, I get in trouble for doing that. So, nonetheless, you are directed to vote on these items.
Thank you.
Overall impact is not significant, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that is all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn, for allowing me to give this report. It was a very short and sweet meeting. We had no action items, relatively few people in the audience, and I think we were there probably 15 or 20 minutes. So it was a good meeting.
Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, well, first we had the October's Public Safety Committee meeting was this past Wednesday, a week ago, the 21st. We had a fairly full agenda again. One of the items that was addressed to the fire department was the inordinate amount of spice-related medical calls of their resources and personnel. So much so that I think the chief reported I logged 24 transports in one day. And Chief LeBlanc is here, so he might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. But in any event, it's, there's a high concern on perhaps burnout of our resources for these type of calls, because it's not much you can do other than scoop and run, and oftentimes you don't know whether the person's breathing or not. So you're sending a lot of apparatus, a lot of resources, in particular our medic units, to the point of having to stage our Eagle River medic unit on the Glen Highway at about Fort Rich, if I understood right, so that they would have enough medic rigs to cover other issues in town. So big concern. We're happy to report that the mayor's administration is actually, in conjunction with members of the Public Safety Committee, introduced this in basically criminalizing again our spice, and there's been some edits, and as you remember, we got in on the co-sponsors. I appreciate our Public Safety Committee members co-sponsoring on the changes to that ordinance. With that, we have an academy that graduates Thursday from the police department, and we've also got a fire academy starting January, February, I understand, through about 20 to 25 folks projected, and there's hope that we'll have enough resources or enough persons applying for 3 academies at the Anchorage Police Department next year. Health Department handled a pretty good-sized issue that's going on with emulsions and the fumes that are coming from out on King Street, and they did a lot of extensive work and working with the community on trying to abate the concerns there. So there were other things that were discussed, but those are the highlights of our meeting. We'll have our next meeting in November, the 3rd Wednesday in November. I had it up here just a moment ago. If you'll bear with me, it looked like the meeting is scheduled for, I think, the 18th of November, but please bear with me here. Yes, Wednesday, 18th of November. Mr. Chairman, I do have to make a disclosure. It's on an item up for public hearing on, I believe it's 14G. And my disclosure is I am a member of the pre-funding medical reimbursement for Anchorage Police, as an Anchorage Police officer retired. I'm in Plan 3. And the way essentially this funding works is if I spend $1, I'm reimbursed $1 from the plan. If I spend $1,000, I'm reimbursed $1,000. I don't get the funding. I don't actually receive any compensation, any monies until I spend money, and so then it's a reimbursable account. There's a sizable amount in my account because I haven't been using it for a number of years. It's built in, but even if I were to decide I don't want to be a member of this plan, I cannot take that funding with me. It's not a cash and carry. Although I make that in full disclosure, it's not a substantive amount of my income, but I do believe that this body should rule on whether or not I have a conflict on this matter.
Thank you. Mr. Falsey, I asked you to look at this question earlier.
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that the provision that Mr. Honeman is looking at would affect the pre-funding of the plan, but not the benefits that Mr. Honeman would stand to receive, Assemblyman Honeman would stand to receive, so we don't see that there would be a conflict there.
On the Western Legal Counsel, it's really...
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Can I just go through our checklist for the record? Yeah. I always like to do this so we have it on the record so Mr. Honeman is completely protected. frankly. When we're determining a financial or an interest, there's a number of factors that we have to consider. So, Mr. Honeman, if you'll indulge me, I just want to ask you a couple questions. Yep. Is the private or financial, in this case it'd be a financial interest, a substantial part of the matter under consideration, in your view?
No.
Okay, I don't believe so.
Me individually.
Yeah, I don't believe so either. This has to do with pre-funding of the trust, Mr. Honeman. In your view, do you think the pre-funding of the trust will have any impact on any potential claims you have in the trust or payment of those claims?
The information that I've read from the municipality indicates that there would not be, so I don't believe there is.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Honeman has has a financial interest, but it's generally possessed by a large class of people, being all the members of the trust. Also, our action tonight, I don't believe, will be dependent upon his payment, as he stated, and he's indicated this isn't a substantial. His financial interest isn't a substantial portion of the trust. So, I don't believe he has a conflict, and he should be allowed to participate.
Does anybody else wish to join in on this discussion? Seeing no one is ruling the chair, you're directed to vote on this. You don't have a conflict of interest, sir, based on Mr. Bowski's questioning and Mr. Falsey, who is the city attorney, who represents us in court issues.
Thank you.
You're not getting away from this one.
For the record, to my colleagues, I did not respond to any inquiries or letters or emails or phone calls reference this issue to any members of the plan. So even as an assembly member, I should have been able to. I waited until I could make disclosure and have a ruling made.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Starr, anything from your committee, sir?
Audit meets on Thursday at 1:15. This Thursday, 1:15, room 155.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. That completes committee reports. Next item is addendum to the agenda. If I get a motion to incorporate in a second.
Second. Second.
Okay. I'm going to go through with it. Item 9C2 under bid awards, the same memorandum AM 6/26/2015 recommendation of award to Cooley Company for providing year-round road maintenance services in the Girdwood Limited Road Services area for the Municipality of Anchorage Maintenance and Operations Department. ITB 2015 B081, $600,000 Purchasing Department. On ordinances and resolutions for introduction, item 9F6B, ordinance AO 2015-123S, an ordinance repealing and reenacting Anchorage Municipal Code section 8.35.500, illicit synthetic drugs, including substantial changes to the penalty section and amending the minor offense fine schedule and misdemeanor penalty reference table at AMC section 8.05.025. Accordingly, Assembly Chair Trainee, Assembly Vice Chair Gray Jackson, Assembly Member Honeman, public hearing requested on 11/10/15. There's an accompanying Assembly memorandum with it, AM 6/22/2015A. Item 9F10, Ordinance 2015-126, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code AMC Section 9.28.030, insurance or other security required, and AMC Section 9.28.026, impoundment and forfeiture of vehicle accordingly, amending AMC Section 9.28.050, driving a motor vehicle with a screen device operating, and AMC Section 9.48.010, penalties and traffic offense fine schedule, AMC Section 9.48.130. Accordingly, Department of Law public hearing requested on 11/10/2015. There's an accompanying statement memorandum, AM 6/27/2015. And I've got laid on the table item we want to add to this. It is, I think you all have copies of it. It's referenced as 9F5B. This is AO 2015-111S, an omnibus ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, amending Anchorage Municipal Code and Anchorage Municipal Code regulation to modify existing and including additional fees, fines, and penalties.
Mr. Chairman?
I know. I
Mr.
need a
Chairman?
motion to incorporate that if I could.
Mr. Chairman?
What?
Was that the 2015-111S that was introduced by Mr. Evans?
Yes.
And
I'll need a motion.
Move to incorporate.
Ask a second. Any objection to it? Mr. Honum, Mr. Starr, any objection to incorporation of this into the addendum agenda?
No objection.
And that's all laid on the table items I've got. So let's go ahead and vote.
Just a second, let me catch up with you.
Okay, sorry.
Now you're going to vote on the incorporation.
Okay, Mr. Starr, we're going to vote on incorporation. You're first.
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. You what? I know. I didn't know electricity was that slow. Okay, it's on yours, but this will just take a second.
Okay, we have, it is recorded. It just,
Okay.
oh, so it's not showing up for you. You know, Mr. Trainee, I've lost the motion. It was just gone. You're going to have to, do you want me to reset, or we can?
Why don't you reset and we'll revote it?
Okay.
We're having a small computer glitch. Not changing my screen yet.
Okay. Now you have something.
Okay,
Let's do that. How's that?
good.
Great.
That's passed unanimously. We've now modified the document in front of us. I'll need a motion on the consent agenda.
Second?
Moved and seconded, and I'll no doubt go down through the line. For those things need pull for a little further discussion. Mr. Hall, sir.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear what you said.
We're now going down the line for those items that the assembly members wish to hold.
No items. Thank you.
Ms.
None.
Johnston, ma'am.
No items, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull item 14G, please. And that's it. Thank you.
That's consent agenda. That's on the regular agenda. That's a public hearing item, sir. Can't pull that one. Sorry, sir. Anything else? No. Okay. Mr. Evans.
9 Alpha 2, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull 9 Delta 3. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flynn, sir. Ms. Dombowski, ma'am.
9 Alpha 1 and 9 Echo 4.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, sir.
No items.
Mr. Honeman.
No items, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Starr, sir.
No items.
Thank you. We'll now vote on the balance of the consent agenda with the exception of those things that were pulled for a little further discussion. Mr. Starr, please vote first.
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. That's approved unanimously. Now we'll go back to those items we'll pull for a little further discussion. The first one is item 9A1, Resolution AR 2015-281, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing the month of October as National Disability Employment Awareness Month. You pulled that, Ms. Dombowski.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ask unanimous consent and approval. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Okay. Seeing no objection, Madam Clerk, let the minutes reflect we approved it unanimously.
Is there someone here to accept?
Okay. Don't see anybody here.
There's nobody here to accept? you want me to read it, or do you want
If you would read it, ma'am.
Okay. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing the month of October as National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Whereas workplaces welcome talents of all people, including people with disabilities, are a critical part of our efforts to build an inclusive community and strong economy. In this spirit, the municipality of Anchorage is recognizing National Disability Employment Awareness Month to raise awareness about disability employment issues and celebrate the many and varied contributions of people with disabilities. Whereas persons with disabilities must always be given opportunities to reach their full potential as contributing members of our society today and in the future, acknowledge of this worthy observance reinforces the idea of respect, fairness, and inclusion, and the realization that we must do everything possible to ensure we all live and work in with the freedom and dignity that we all deserve. Whereas the month of October is recognized as National Disability Employment Awareness Month, to encourage the integration of Americans with disabilities into our nation's workforce. Activities during the month reinforce the value and talent added to our workplace and communities by people with disabilities and affirms the municipality's commitment to all of our citizens. And now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly resolves to proclaim October 2015 as National Disability Employment Awareness Month. In doing so, we call upon employers, schools, and other community organizations in Anchorage, Alaska, to hire qualified Anchorage residents with disabilities and to observe this month with appropriate programs and activities, and to advance its important message that people with disabilities are equal to the task throughout the year. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 27th day of October 2015.
Thank you very much. On behalf of our Disability Commission, we very much appreciate this honor and agree with it wholeheartedly that our citizens who have any kind of disability or challenge are very valued in the workplace, and we appreciate the Assembly's recognition of that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item in front is item 9A2, Resolution A 2015-282, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring Mark Best for his more than 33 years of excellent public service with the municipality of Anchorage.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ask unanimous consent. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
See no objection, Madam Clerk. That is approved.
Whereas Mark Best began serving the municipality of Anchorage in 1982 as an operator mechanic on the heavy mechanical crew for Municipal Light and Power, and whereas in 1986 he was moved into a plant operator position where he learned and operated all the generation equipment, not only at Plant 1, but Plant 2 as well. He was responsible for all the startup, shutdown, load control, and all boiler operation for the steam turbine. And whereas he was moved to water treatment technician in 1993, during which time Mark was instrumental in the complete rebuild and upgrade of the demineralizer used for water system at Plant 2, which helps maintain the correct water chemistry in the boiler system. A quality water system can save millions of dollars and drastically increase the lifespan of a boiler system. The Plant 2 water quality system has been recognized by several of the vendors and equipment representatives after inspection of the boiler system, and whereas he was promoted to Plant 2 foreman in 1999, during which time he was responsible for 22 employees, as well as the maintenance and operation of the generation facility. And whereas in 2002, Mark became the safety technician for ML&P, where he helped improve the safety standards, as well as start the new hire safety training program for ML&P. And whereas in 2006, Mark was moved back into an operator position due to a lack of qualified operators at ML&P. During this time, Mark was highly involved in the launch and implementation of the TAGS Pro system, which is used for the lockout tagout program for the generation division. He spent several months on updating the electrical and mechanical diagrams, as well as updating the piping and instrument diagrams. These updates made the implementation of the TAG Pro system possible. And whereas, throughout Mark's career, he has seen, as well as been involved in, many changes at ML&P. He was always the first to step up and to offer help if a coworker was in need. His dedicated commitment, quality of work, and concern for his fellow workers show that not only did he consider this a career, but a second family. And whereas, after more than 33 years of serving the municipality of Anchorage, Mark Best retired on September 23, 2015. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly resolves that Mark Best is recognized and honored for his professional excellence, dedication, and many years of public service, positively contributing to his co-workers and the citizens of the municipality of Anchorage. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 27th day of October, 2015.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berkowitz, Chair Mr. Trainee, Assembly members, Ms. Judy Brady with the Commission, MLMP Commission, and Mark Johnson, General Manager at MLMP, and most importantly of all, Chief Shop Steward Dusty Menifee. You might have heard of him. If you haven't, you should. Thank you for this very much. What comes to my mind most of all is the part about being family. And I would entrust you each with the fact that you get to serve on this board of decision making, and there's people like me that watch the slideshow go by. And we all are people. We all have families. We all pay taxes, and I would say that going forward, yes, I'm a union member, is that a dialogue is the most beneficial thing in any situation, especially labor negotiations. Due to no fault of my own, as a 25-year-old man, I showed up to work, and due to the city and to IBEW, I have quite a retirement that I'm proud that I'm part of a labor union to be able to enjoy that. There's been a lot of changes at the plant over the years, and we have a really good staff out there. All the workers are, my biggest concern was we would find people better than me. And I would like to tell you that MLMP rests in good hands, in generation at least, because I don't know about all the other ones. They're definitely smarter than me. They're younger, better looking, and skinnier. And if I could find the right lawyer to sue MLMP in the city for my lack of hair, my weight gain, and my sore knees, I would, but I don't think that would go too far. Once again, I want to thank you very much and appreciate having had the very distinct privilege to work for MLMP and everyone that I saw go by, mayors and assembly members, for the very distinct privilege to work for MLMP for all these years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Best. We have a few questions for you, sir, if you don't mind.
Oh, no.
Mr. Flynn.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't generally speak up at these retirement ceremonies. But, Mr. Best, in reading this resolution, I was particularly impressed by your work on the lockout-tagout procedure. I think I've spent more time working with that kind of system than most of my colleagues. And it makes a tremendous difference, not just obviously for you, but for all your colleagues and for MLMP as an entity. So I want to say thank you for that. And, as an MLMP customer, I enjoyed extraordinary reliability, better than I think most of my colleagues, because I happen to be in the MLMP service area. So thank you for that, too.
Thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Best, I feel with you about the lack of hair and obviously a little bit of girth as I go, too, so never fear, you well earned. I know that you gave it your best, and certainly what you could be said you were the MLNP's best. I don't know how they'll do without their best, but the show, as they say, must go on. I hope you enjoy your retirement, And, certainly this is a huge loss, 33 years of institutional knowledge. Just reading up on just those few little snippets of things. You'll walk, I'm sure, around that plant, and there's probably guys that are better than you as you yield, and not too humble to admit, but they won't know those machines quite like you did and do. So don't go too far, because somebody may call you and say, hey, we're in trouble here. And, you might be able to whisper something over the phone. It might save the day. So thanks again for keeping our ML&P service reliable and steady and cost effective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Welcome, Mark. I generally speak at service recognition resolutions because it gives me an opportunity to publicly thank you for your many, many years of service to the citizens of Anchorage. Enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Little known fact is when they moved me out of safety, Miss Gray Jackson took my office from me. You didn't know it, but you did.
She's like that.
I was gone.
Mark, thanks for everything you've done for the city. People take it for granted. The light switch is thrown, the electricity comes on. Nothing is easy and nothing should be taken for granted. So thank you so much for all you've done for the city, sir.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to acknowledge, too, that Dusty Menifee had a huge part in the lockout tagout program. He and another individual by the name of Jimmy Ross got me when I was kind of getting buried towards the end, and they made a huge difference. And I can't say enough about safety. My time of foreman, there were people that liked me, and there might have been a few more that didn't. But they knew one thing, and that's why I preach safety every morning, break time, lunch, break time. I said, I want you to go home with all your fingers and toes. I don't want you mad at me, but if you are, that's okay because you're okay. Safety cannot be overemphasized enough. Thank you very much for the privilege to serve ML&P and the city of Anchorage.
Well, you're always invited here, so if you want some boring time sat on Tuesdays, come here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go on to Ms. Gray Jackson, was there anybody that was appointed to a board or commission that's here? Yes. Because we approved some. Come on down here and tell us your name and what you're appointed to. There's always a penalty if you admit to something, so come on down. Anybody else supported a board or commission? I think you may be the only one here.
The sacrificial lamb. Two.
Where's the other one at? Okay.
You can introduce yourself, Kirk. Go ahead.
I am Kirk Rose. I've been appointed to the Anchorage Public Library Board.
Great. Thank you.
Watch out for the young lady behind you.
I'm Brett Joklop. I was reappointed to the Watershed and Natural Resources Commission. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And my thanks to the administration, because we're now starting to see some of these boards and commissions filled, and we appreciate the work your administration is doing to make this a reality, because it's how our town works. Appreciate that. Ms. Gray Jackson, item 9D3, same memorandum AM 6/23/2015, amending the 2016 Assembly meeting schedule for the month of December.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make an amendment to line 12. I moved that it read December 6th and December 20th.
Second.
Thank you.
Moving to second. Any discussion, ma'am?
No, thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion among assembly members? If not, let's vote on it. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Please vote. Thanks for cleaning that up, Ms. Gray Jackson.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I know. Now we've got the document amended. Let's vote on the main motion. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. And that is approved. We're now on page 3 of our document on item 9E4, information memorandum, AAM 144-2015, executive appointments and compensation.
Move
Ms.
to accept.
Dombrowski, you pulled that, ma'am.
Move to accept.
Second.
Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Through the chair to the administration, I see Chief Tolley listed here, and in one column it says job title Deputy Police Chief, and the other, obviously, Office of Chief of Police. Does this reflect his new promotion to police chief, or does this reflect just his deputy status?
His salary doesn't change.
His salary doesn't change, so it'll stay the
119.
125.
Excuse me, yeah, the 125.
125,008. Okay, and then up a little further, in public transit, maybe I just didn't know this, is that a mistype? Should it be Jody Cars, or is her legal name Joel?
I don't know.
I've always called her Jody. I've
No,
known her
me
for
too.
11 years.
Me
but that-
too.
Yeah, I just don't know if that's
I know her legal name is Cars Banks, but I don't know what her legal first name is.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's the same person. It is Jody, though, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then another observation that I have, can you give me a little historical, I just don't remember, the last person who occupied the chief of staff position, what was their pay rate?
I don't think we know that off the top of our head. We can certainly find out and get back to you.
That would be helpful. And I have one more question. When I look at the chief of staff making combined $190,256 with a base salary of $125, to me that stood out because the police chief, the fire chief, the city attorney, they all make less. So I'd like to understand what the justification is for such a high pay range. If it's historical, understandable, but I kind of want to understand what this person is doing to justify such a high pay range. Because as I look, the OMB director is making $119,995. This chief of police, $125. CFO, $121. Fire chief, $117. Municipal attorney, $119,995. And then when you look at benefits, I mean, this is a position paying more than the fire chief, the police chief, the city attorney. I just don't understand what the basis for that is.
That was the salary that the mayor determined. I mean, we'll get you the information. I'm confident it's in line with historical practice, but I don't have the exact salary numbers for Mr. Baker, Mr. Kendall, Mr.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head either, and that's why I just want to understand what the job position entails. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowski.
Mr. Cheney, since I have this, and I pulled this for two reasons. Number one, to ask those questions, but number two, I wanted to give a shout out, because I forgot to do it in my committee reports, to Chief Gillum over there, and over the weekend, and also to Battalion Chief Kevin Keene and EMS Chief Mendavi. Mr. Chair, over the weekend, an issue came up. We had a fatality in Eagle River about a week ago, and there was some possessions that the family was trying to retrieve, and these three individuals were very instrumental in helping the family retrieve the possessions and get through. And I just wanted to say specifically thank you to Chief Gillum, who's here tonight, because he personally reached out to the family and called them, and that was service above and beyond, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bowski, for bringing that forward. Appreciate that. Mr. Flynn, sir?
Yeah, just I think there's maybe a small typo. We have two people entitled Executive Director of Economic and Community Development. I think Mr. Hart and Mr. Schutte. I believe that's correct for Mr. Schutte, but an error for Mr. Hart. Do we need to make a small amendment to this to address that?
Administration?
Yes, we can clarify. They're listed in different departments, so I don't know that they don't necessarily have the same job title, but we can clarify that and report back to the Assembly if a different job title is appropriate in either, in either case.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Ms. Johnston, ma'am.
Actually, to Mr. Flynn's, I think one is the Department of Community Development, and the other one's the Economic and Community Development. But that aside, I'm a little confused with all these chiefs going around. So Chief Tully is our chief of police now, right?
Yes, since he was hired, he was promoted from deputy chief to chief.
Okay, I was confused for a moment. Thank you.
Yeah, the report is issued, requires us to report on essentially date of hire, and he was the deputy chief when he was hired, and then 6 or 8 weeks later, he was promoted to chief of police.
No other questions? Mr. Starr, any question on this document, sir?
No, but I can clarify from the information I researched out. Mr. Baker made about $20,000 less his compensation package for chief of staff. Called the executive manager, actually, was $170,026 total compensation.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Look for the administration checking that historically, and just give us a breakdown on it, if you would, please, Mr. Abbott. Let's vote to accept this item. No other comments from any members? Mr. Starr.
I'll move to accept, yes.
Please vote. We accepted that document. That completes our work on our agenda. We're now down to item 11A. We can take action on this. The last meeting, public hearing was completed. I think a motion was made, Madam Clerk, to approve it. It was seconded. There's no motion? Okay. Then we need a motion on it. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from some members. This is ordinance 2015-105. Mr. Evans, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've seen this before, and so I guess my comments are not much different than they were in June. But I did a little more research on this as a lover of history. I went back to 2011 to see what transpired, what were the reasons this language was added to the ordinance. And it was actually quite illuminating. Apparently in 2011, and a lot of members of this body, Mr. Craney was chair at the time, as you might expect, there was a committee that was formed. I believe it included Ms. Gray Jackson, Mr. Gutierrez, who was on the assembly at the time, Mr. Birch, and Mr. Hall, that looked into this issue and proposed the language that was added to this ordinance that we're now trying to delete. And there were a lot of comments at the time. Mr. Gutierrez commented that that committee took only about 30 minutes because the language that they came up with they thought was so good, it just made their job easier. Ms. Gray Jackson said it was a very good ordinance, the inclusion of the language, and thought it would do the job that was intended to do. And then it was voted on unanimously. It was 11-0 vote. A number of members that are currently on this body voted in favor of this. So I'm a bit perplexed. I don't support this. I didn't support it in June. I still don't support it. And I just don't understand exactly why it is that we're taking out this language when nothing really seems to have changed. The only appearance to me, looking at this from the outside, is that state revenue sharing is going down. So this language that we put in 2011, which didn't necessarily have any real bite to it with the tax ability of the city because state revenue sharing was going up. Now that revenue sharing is going down, this language would have some actual bite and would keep the tax cap based on the property taxes from the previous year, kind of a long algebraic formula. But the bottom line is if we pass this tonight, it raises taxes. When we talked about this in June, it was all speculation, and the argument was, well, it doesn't commit us to raising taxes. It just gives us the flexibility to do, either raise taxes or do other things. But now in October, we have the administration's budget, and that budget is predicated on this passing. There's about $1.6 million in increases to the budget that are projected in the administration's budget that cannot be implemented unless this passes. So passing this ordinance, changing the way we deal with state revenue sharing and as far as the tax cap goes, if we pass this, it's tantamount to passing at least about a $1.6 million tax increase. So I urge the body to oppose this. I think not only do I I'm against the tax increase part of it. I also think the way it's currently written establishes a really good practice for how we treat state revenue sharing, even if it's going up. It shouldn't be used to provide for essential services, so that when it goes, because it's not money we control generally, it should be extra money that we use for special projects and other things, and not money we rely on for the day-to-day operation of the city, so that when it goes away, if it goes away, we're not forced to simply go back to the taxpayers to make up the difference. So for all those reasons, I will strongly oppose this and urge my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston.
Mr. Evans actually spoke to most of my concerns, but I just wanted to also emphasize that I did ask the administration if this budget was predicated on this passing this evening, and I have to say that and it is. And I have to say that's an issue for me. I think I would have preferred that we address this, either pass it or not pass it, and if you wanted to deal with it in an S version, that might have been all right, but to have the budget predicated on something that we had not addressed yet, I just think timing could have been better.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I will be a no vote like I've been in the past.
Mr. Flynn, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually pretty familiar with this topic.
I think you did the last time we brought it forward.
And I think Mr. Evans raised an excellent point, which is we should not use state revenues for recurring expenses, which is exactly what we have been doing for the last 6 years. And this language that we would be deleting avoids that problem, because it then allows us to use state revenues for tax relief, which is a one-time expense as opposed to an ongoing expense. That's why I proposed it before. That's why I'm going to support it again. And that's why this is much better policy than what is currently in code. And if you want to know the real reason that it was put in code in the first place, was that certain members of this body were using the tax cap as a political bludgeon against people with whom they disagree.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Honeman, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Mr. Flynn started out with everything that I was going to say, which is the fact that Mr. Evans is right. I think we have our own tax revenue and with fees and fines, our property taxes, and what we can generate and collect from the municipality, and it's all well within the cap with, of course, the 5 exceptions, the population growth and then real estate. I don't have to read it to all you guys, but basically there's exceptions to increase the tax cap. And this body, and including with the administration in conjunction with budgets as we are presented in debate and, of course, approved, I've always been more interested if we had enough funding extra, if you will, because we don't know what the legislature is going to give us until after they conclude their business, and it's well after we've approved our initial budget. So we only get one more chance at it at the first, I should say officially, through the first quarter budget. I understand we can make changes as needed otherwise. But this formula actually gets us closer to using funding from the state if should money be coming, and I'm not sure they will this year, to give tax rebates and certainly not be factored in on our programmatic budget that we should be approving from our own revenue. So I support this for that very reason, Mr. Evans, that you made the argument to. I'll support it, and I think it makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Mr. Starr.
Well, I'm kind of confused a little bit by the conversation because those on the body, and I'll take exception, Mr. Flynn, to beating up people over the tax cap and how it's calculated and how we enforce it. What I believe we're trying to do is sort of provide some consistency to it. The concept that somehow or another we have to preserve taxing authority for some later date is kind of disingenuous to those that anticipate a 6-year fiscal plan or long-term planning. So I think I concur with the idea that state revenue sharing shouldn't be accounted for in annual spending plans. But in this case, and I'll put this to Ms. Gray Jackson, The Berkowitz budget this year has $9.2 million of anticipated state revenue sharing in it. So my point is, if you want to do the above the line and below the line that was more familiar on the Begich year budgets, wouldn't we have to pull out this $9.2 million anticipated state revenue sharing?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Mr. Starr, to be quite honest with you, I'm not clear on what your question is. Thank you, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
the budget this year speaks to using state revenue sharing. They anticipate $9.2 million of anticipated state revenue sharing coming into the city's coffers. So that's right in our budget. So if you want to provide the flexibility that state revenue sharing can perhaps be used in alternative methods, then why are we anticipating it being $9.2 million this year and part of our annual spending plan?
If I may, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Starr, I think the administration is probably the folks who can answer your question rather than me, but more appropriately. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Starr?
Well, again, the idea that we sort of provide some consistency in how we're going to apply it is probably the main goal for me. The idea that if you're going to sort of wait and see until you figure out how much the state's going to give you, you can't go with the concept of a balanced budget. We have to anticipate something to go into the budget. So the idea that you're going to sort of allow that flexibility to incur later and pull it off the tax burden, you're basically just automatically asking to increase the budget when the state revenue sharing shows up. Certainly we can set the mill rate lower if we so choose, but that means we go into April with a little bit of uncertainty. We don't do, as the administration is doing this year, of anticipating some sort of state revenue sharing and sending the message that we want it. We're counting on it. You pull it out of the budget completely, and I believe the state's going to say, well, you balance your budget without it, therefore it is. Ms. Gray-Jackson and Ms. Johnston know what AML is talking about in terms of increased revenue sharing or decreased revenue sharing conversations, and so it's going to go down, certainly. We shouldn't count on it. But in this case, I'm trying to illustrate, you're counting on $9.2 million in this year's budget. If you pull that out of there, what are you going to replace that revenue with? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Dombowski, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to see if there's anybody from the administration that can answer Mr. Starr's question.
The administration's recommended budget does anticipate using state revenue sharing for the current fiscal year in the 2016 budget.
So, Mr. Abbott, what is the impact, as you see it, or the administration sees it, in this ordinance?
It will adjust the way that the tax cap can be calculated. It doesn't require additional spending or additional taxation, but it would change that formula. It has a numerical impact. I think we've calculated that, and I think it's in the summary of economic effects as well. But we've made no bones about it this year. Given the other revenue issues that the municipality is addressing, we didn't believe we had a choice except to use the anticipated revenue sharing as a revenue source for the general government budget.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So let me put it a different way. So my understanding is essentially there's uncertainty with state revenue sharing. This ordinance would allow to keep that revenue sharing essentially, let's say, outside the tax cap. And so next year when we build our budget for 2017, so what you're saying is that $9.2 million, we can just kind of, if we get that $9.2 million, we can keep that outside the tax cap. The tax cap will still be at that $9.2 million, whatever we get from the state level. So that means essentially you could just hypothetically transition the revenue stream from the state to taxpayers. Does that make sense?
Mr. Abbott?
Well, could the funds obtained from the state under revenue sharing be spent differently, i.e. for tax relief rather than for general government spending? Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Abbott. So essentially, what we're watching happen is we're watching the city government realize that they could be losing a funding source from the state of Alaska, and rather than diminishing government spending or doing things differently, essentially we're shifting the burden to property tax owners. I think that's a problem. I actually had a whole lot of things to say. Mr. Evans actually covered virtually everything I was going to say. To me, this is, again, another example of keep an eye on this hand, but don't see what this hand's doing. I think this is an automatic tax increase, but I am encouraged to see that some members of this assembly have committed tonight here that if we do get revenue sharing back from the state, they're willing to do a tax rebate. So I will be pushing that.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Steele, sir.
Yes. A budget is just a guess, the best guess we can have, but a guess. This is what we do to the school district every single year. Not only do they have to adjust it based upon what we do in improving their budget, they also have to adjust it based upon what they get from the state. A budget is flexible. It can be changed. The earlier the better, certainly, but you make your best shot and you look at the needs and you make a budget, and that's what the administration has done.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question.
Go ahead, sir.
To the administration, Mr. Abbott, to clarify your expectation, the tax cap formula currently now talks about the total taxes collected this year being the base for the total taxes collected next year. Do you anticipate then with this action, let's use the $9.2 million, if we got $9.2 million of state revenue sharing and you had it inside general revenue spending like it is now, are you saying that you feel that the tax cap would be increased by $9.2 million?
No.
Now, that's where I have the issue with it. I have no problem keeping it outside of the general formula, but the concept that total taxes collected, Mr. Steele in particular, it's not a guess. We know what total taxes collected were last year, and that's the formula basis that we need to continue to build the budget on for that. If you're going to have it one way, you can't have it the other. And it's not a flippant statement to the administration because I've seen it applied both ways. But if you're going to build your budget around it in general operating spending, then you're going to collect taxes in there to complete your budget. If you're going to take it out and raise the taxes as high as you can, and that'll be your total taxes collected for next year. Folks, I really urge caution, and I wish I was there to speak more passionately about it, but either delay this again or put it off till after this year's budget and we can have some more conversation to talk about it. I strongly urge a no vote on this policy change.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Honeman?
I don't want to.
Then Ms. Gray Jackson.
I don't want to belabor it too much, but basically, I want to take a little bit of exception to what Mr. Dombrowski was saying, and that is, I don't have any intentions on raising taxes or raising the cap. Simply saying that if 9.2 is in our budget is what's anticipated, and we get 12.2, I don't want it to be forced into this formula here. I think it should be us, this body, working with this administration, what to do with that money. I think having the formula the other way forces our hand at that, and we have no control. But I think we should be the body deciding that decision. Unless a district project comes in from a legislator, and I don't anticipate a lot of their CIP money coming in like they have in the past, I think it's this body and this administration should be working together. It is a change in philosophy, Mr. Dombrowski, I'll give you that. But it is just like the past administration who had a change in philosophy that I didn't necessarily agree with in most cases either, so when it came to financial. So I fully support it, and I don't think we lose anything by having the resources that may or may not come to us and be able to spend it as we believe is necessary and best for the finances of this city.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank all my colleagues for their comments. I really appreciate your point of view. The tax cap is very, very complicated. It took me many, many years to understand it, and sometimes I'm wondering if I'm even there. Mr. Evans, I really want to thank you for reminding me about that committee that I was on, and the meeting was so short, I really don't even remember it. In addition, that was 2011. This is 2015. Things are vastly different now. And until we establish another source of revenue to pay for our services that our community so well deserves, we have to do something. And this ordinance simply allows both the mayor and the assembly some flexibility when funding each year's budget. And, you know, and we're not looking at just arbitrarily raising taxes within our community, but you know, we're going to base our decisions on what our constituents have to say. That's why we have the public hearing process. So listening to our constituents, if we pass this ordinance, we simply have the opportunity to either increase taxes based on what we hear from them or cut services. That's the bottom line. So I think this is a really good tool to allow us to have, if you will, a bank account in the event that we lose our jobs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. See no one else? Mr. Starr, vote first, sir.
No.
Please vote. That is approved 7-4.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, sir. I know you're about to call for a break, but I believe we have some...
Well, I'm going to make another announcement.
Okay, well, before we do break, I would like for the outstanding young people in our audience who I believe are attendees of my alma mater.
Where was that
to come
at?
up and introduce themselves. That would be West Anchorage High School. Ms. Domboski's favorite institution.
If you're a young person, or you think you are, and you want to talk to us in school, come on down here. Who's here as a student today?
Who's student?
Let's get them all. All of
Come on
them.
up.
Everybody.
Okay,
Everybody.
come on down. We want to know your name and what school you go to.
Right up
Otherwise,
to the
we're not going to
microphone.
sign your documents.
Right to the microphone.
Bottom line. There is a hook to this thing. Just tell us your name and what school you go to. We promise we won't bite.
Speak right into the microphone. Somebody's got to go first.
Right there.
I'm Matthew Bonias, and I go to Diamond High School.
Antonio Villamore, Diamond High School. Adam Abdallah, Service High School.
Kyle Healy, Service High School.
Ashlyn Jado, West High School. We're all from Miss Kimball's class at West High School. I'm Julia McQueen.
Alyssa. Sophie Jones.
Thanks for being here.
I'm Caitlin Connery. I go to Service.
Nathan Danielle, Service High School.
I'm Jason McKee, Service High School.
I'm Sarah Souders from Service High School.
Morgan Kellen from Service High School.
Emily Rains from Service High School.
I'm Adam Comer from Service High School.
I'm Aline Zana from Service High School.
I'm Sage Romy from Service High School.
Thomas Nkota from Diamond High School. Keith Harvey from Diamond. Ari Wedemeyer from Service High School.
I'm Jacob Walsh from Eagle River High School.
I'm Eric Lengren from Eagle River High School.
I'm David Knights from Diamond. I'm William Orton from Diamond High.
Ethan Hunstiger from Eagle River High.
I'm Hunter Roy from Eagle River High School.
I'm Jordan Ricker from Eagle River High.
I'm Dakota Tucker from Diamond High School.
I'm Kate McGee from Eagle River High School. I'm Miranda Bay from Eagle River High School.
Well, our thanks for you being here tonight. We'll sign your documents for you. For those that are here that want to talk to us about item 13A, it is the intention of the Assembly to postpone that item indefinitely. So, I'm still going to have to open the public hearing, but you don't need to testify. It's my feeling it's going to go away. Now, if you're here for item 13B, the Girgwood, because the state's changed where they're going to stop service, we're going to move to postpone that indefinitely too. So if you're here for the Girgwood issue, go home. It's a long drive. With that, we're going to take our dinner break. We should be right back in about 20 minutes. Or 15. Thank you. Set this. Assembly members will take their seats again. We'll get this meeting started up. Thanks for being here. Any students that didn't get the paperwork signed earlier? Okay. Next item in front of us, under continued public hearings, is item 13A, ordinance AO 2015-69, an ordinance of the Anchorage Assembly approving a memorandum of agreement between the State of Alaska, Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, and the municipality of Anchorage of an interim agreement for the fair market value exchange of land. Public hearing this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record, spell your last name, and tell us what part of Anchorage you live in. Now, it is the intention of the Assembly, Mr. Steele is going to make a motion to postpone this indefinitely, but I still have to open up the public testimony. So anybody wishing to testify on this item, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body? Mr. Steele.
Aye.
We're losing your...
I move to table indefinitely.
Second.
Moved and seconded. What? He's moving to postpone indefinitely. That was his motion.
Mr. Chair, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do. We have 6.
We do. I just texted Mr. Starr. I was supposed to do it before we started.
I'm sorry. You want me to wait?
No. Well, it's okay if that's...
Your motion, Mr. Steele, was to postpone this item indefinitely. Is that correct, sir? Yes. Thank you. Anything else, sir? Okay. Ms. Dombowski, anything, ma'am? Okay. I would rather have the rest of the senators back in here. Ernie, could you go get them, please? Sir? What? No. I just want to get him in here.
Thanks.
Okay, we have item 13A up. There's a motion to postpone indefinitely in a second by Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Okay.
I feel like we need Jeopardy music.
You know, by the next meeting, I'll have that music here, wave file.
Right.
We could do that.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Chair, while we're waiting?
Ma'am?
The question being, I've had a few, it's going to be later in the budget items, but I've had a few people say they hate how that we combine public testimony on all the budget items.
Okay.
Because rather than getting to speak for 3 minutes on the operating budget and 3 minutes on the capital budget, 3 minutes on the 6-year fiscal plan, they only get 3 minutes for all of them. Is there something that we can do?
You could vote no to combine the hearing.
Well, I know you're going to do that, but I was going to say,
I'm sorry.
just to be fair to people, if people want to speak on multiple budgets, I mean, I don't mind combining the hearing, but if somebody says, I want to speak on both budgets, can we give them 6 minutes?
Let me think about that for a few minutes.
I thought I'd put it in your cookie jar and let you crumble it around there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just trying to be fair. You know how...
I know. We're all trying to, and I appreciate that,
just
Amy.
about public process,
Okay, the motion in front of us is postponed indefinitely, item 13A. Assembly members, please vote. We'll have Mr. Starr vote first. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Please vote. We got enough on there. That is postponed indefinitely. Next item in front of us is item 13B. It's ordinance AO 2015-110, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, submitted to qualified voters resident.
Waive reading.
Thank you. It's a Gergwood issue. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Keep in mind, one of the makers of it wants to postpone it indefinitely. Anybody wish to testify on this item? Hearing and saying no, public testimony is closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion from assembly members?
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
I couldn't hear Ms. Johnston on her justification. I thought she had a time frame where there was a state trooper commitment, but I didn't understand exactly what she said.
The state trooper commitments through 30 June. Is that right, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, the state troopers will be continuing the the service up and down Seward Highway to Portage, including the communities, though to July 1st, and they're going to continue to keep their headquarters there in Girdwood. So it gives
I understand that, but this would be in front of the voters. You're talking about in April, then, or
No, now it's giving us time to work out some arrangement. We're working on a number of different items to provide public safety for the Turnagain Arm communities, and this gives us time to address it in April. We were going to do, this was a ballot that was going to come before the Girdwood community before, it would have been probably in December, and it was going to be a mail-in ballot, and we don't need to do that now.
I understand now. Thank you.
Ms. Dombrowski, you were on, okay. Hearing and saying no other assembly comments, we'll vote on this item now. Mr. Starr first.
Yes.
Okay. Please vote on this item. The item is postponed indefinitely. Next item in front of us, item 14A, Resolution AR 2015-256, a resolution approving a letter of agreement between the Municipality of Anchorage and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1547 IBEW, regarding night service cruise shift differential and call-out pay. Public hearing on this item is now open. If you wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and second. Moved by Mr. Honeman, second by Ms. Gray Jackson. Any comments from Assembly members? If not,
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
go ahead, Mr. Starr.
Well, the concept of a letter of agreement, I was understanding was that it wasn't a contractual change, or am I missing the concept of a memorandum of understanding confused with a letter of agreement? My point is, I thought when a letter of agreement was put together in front of the Assembly that it was to purpose to clarify language in the existing agreement, and it could not have change of value implications.
We'll try and get you an answer. Administration?
Oh, maybe in the interim, Mr. Chairman, I just point out on the accompanying Assembly memorandum, it says, beginning on line 27, no statement of economic effects is submitted as determined by internal audit because this letter of agreement will reduce certain call-out pay costs and creates no significant cost impact in allowing for some additional shift differential pay.
Okay, and I'll take you up on that, Mr. Flynn. So when you're looking at the whereas statement on the first page, where it talks about moving the call-out pay to 1 hour instead of 2, so your claim is that the letter of agreement can actually have the cost of the agreement go down but not up?
I'm only reading the information that was given to me, sir.
I got you. That's fair enough. And I don't know that I need the answer immediately, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure time is of the essence, but I wouldn't want to misuse the letter of agreement for normal bargaining negotiations.
Okay. Administration?
Yeah, Candace, can you answer this question, please?
Ma'am, can you state your name clearly for the record and your position so Bill can hear you?
Yes, Candace Sherwood, SHERWOOD, Labor Director, Employee Relations Department.
Can you answer Mr. Starr's question, ma'am?
I'm sorry, could you restate the question?
Mr. Starr?
I certainly can, and I'll clarify it a little bit more. My concern is that we're using the letter of agreement to change the contractual value agreed upon in the overall collective bargaining agreement. In particular, it looks like we're reducing the hours guaranteed in overtime pay from 2 to 1 and reducing a benefit implication, which I felt was outside the scope of an LOA.
Mr. Starr, through the chair. No, the prior language in the contract did not specifically address phone calls for after hours, and this language was a clarification and agreement between the municipality and the union on how we would handle specifically these situations on call-out guarantees. There was the no economic impact per internal audit, so no C attached to it.
Are we likely to see a grievance based on the conceptual change that the phone call folks that take overtime pay were expecting 2 hours?
No, sir. Through the chair, that would be, we would possibly receive grievances had the municipality and the union not determined what this language would be and clarified the language.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Certainly.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Any other questions, Mr. Starr? Nope, that's all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry. Next item in front of us, item 14B, ordinance 2015-117, an ordinance of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $79,430,000 in the aggregate principal amount of general obligation school bonds. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name and courtesy for the record, spell your last name, and tell us what part of Anchorage you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Gray Jackson, second by Mr. Honeman. Mr. Honeman.
Mr. Chairman,
I'd
like to ask specifically if the difference between if the legislature holds to its no funding of bonded indebtedness for schools over the next forthcoming future. I mean, I know that they cannot find the future legislators, but the language, of course, is clear that, you know, if they qualify for 6% state debt reimbursement, but if the state chooses to make the full reimbursement, the taxes would be $3.54 to retire, $3.54 per 100,000. Is this language essentially, we know where it's broken out? Do we anticipate, or have we heard anything from either bond council or from legislature, the 60% at least?
Through the chair, Mr. Honeman, I don't believe that we know offhand what the decision on there for the state's going to be with regards to if they're going to go back and apply the 60-70% debt reimbursement to the 2015 proposition.
Could we get your name for the record?
My name is Andy Ratliff. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Management and Budget for the school district.
Got it, ma'am. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Honeman?
I think that'll do it. And these projects were all run by, I'm sorry I didn't make the last joint meeting. These were all passed through the bond council and prioritized and such as they have in the past.
Through the chair, yes, sir. These were, there's $33.9 million from the 2015 proposition out of the 79.4.
Any other comments from Assembly members?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Abbott, I guess, done the best with his knowledge of the school district. The one of the first comments is the 2007 bond package. There must be monies left over from the 2007 approvals. Is that correct?
Mr. Starr, I'm going to let the school district answer that one, too.
Okay, I wasn't sure they were there. Thank you.
We're here.
Through the chair, I think we have 1.2 or 1.3 million from 2007 bonds projected in the sale.
Did you hear that?
Are they, in your opinion, prescribed as what the voters anticipated they were voting on, or are those projects completed and this is just monies left over that reached the bond authorization?
Mr. Starr, my name is Tom Roth. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Anchorage School District. And, excuse me, the immediate response to your question is yes. The reserves that Mr. Ratliff mentioned, approximately $1.3 million, those monies, $370,000 are being directed to Rogers Park, a roof design. Again, that's an approved project by the voters. About 90,000 is being rolled into an existing HVAC replacement program for West High School that's been approved. And then the remaining amount is in ongoing projects for capital improvement.
Yeah, and I'm sort of priming the conversation here a little bit as we go into perhaps tighter times with the lack of state reimbursement and some of that. I've never been comfortable with the policy that, and I'm not saying you're doing it in this case, on the sort of the inference that you can move monies across the board. I know Bond Council has said that, but for example, the Eagle River High School Bonding Authority, it wasn't blanket that you could take money from the Eagle River High School and move it over to another project, even though it perhaps was legal. It would be of clarity that I'd like to make sure we now start tighten up the bonding language. 2007, and here we are in 2015. We're digging pretty deep here for some more bonding authority, and I think we're probably bordering on not really following through on what the voters thought we were going to do back in the day. So thank you for your comments, but I'm not certain that I'm going to vote for this sale yet. I'd like to have the answer that Mr. Honeman raised on what the state's going to do, and I'm going to be a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure.
Do you have a question for these gentlemen?
I do. Okay. Just want to clarify that what amount of this proposed bond sale was approved this spring versus what was been approved previously.
Yes, sir. Through the chair, the $33.9 million of this bond sale was approved in April of 2015.
Okay. So essentially 3/5 of this is pre-approved and therefore, at least theoretically, subject to legislative reimbursement.
Right, and we've still got a letter into the state to see if they're actually going to follow through with that or if they're going to decline reimbursement as they had originally indicated.
On the latter 33, yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. There don't appear to be more questions. Thank you. Ms. Dembowski.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for jumping in late. Mr. Roth, I just want to go back for a little clarity. I was jotting down the numbers as you were explaining the 2007 bond, how much was going to existing voter-approved projects, and then you made the comment the remainder is being rolled into other capital projects. So are those other capital projects voter-approved projects, or are those other capital projects not quite voter-approved? Let me tell you where I'm coming from. Let me tell you where I'm coming from so you're not blindsided here. I'm very cautious when the voters approve a specific project and a certain amount of money. When we have money left over and we just reallocate it to something else, that gets under my skin a little bit. So I want to understand how much of that is money left over that we're appropriating to something maybe that wasn't specifically in the bond that was originally approved. Does that make sense?
Ma'am, it does make sense to me. I'm not prepared at this meeting to give you. I could go back and explain where all that money is going to by project.
Sure. And I guess what I need, in order to have a yes vote from me, what I need to know is how much of this money is money that was left over from other previously approved projects. If I can't get an answer to that tonight, I'll be a no vote, because I think that's an important question for the voters. When I go and I vote for bonds, I read the bond, I think it's a fire truck, that's what I think my money is going towards. But if I find out it's not going to a fire truck and instead it's going to something else, kind of is important to me. So can ASD provide me that answer tonight?
What I would tell you, yes.
Okay.
That the monies that are residual from these past bonds, in most cases they are residual because the cost of the actual projects come in at a lower amount than what was originally estimated.
Mm-hmm. And my point is, if it comes in lower, we don't have to sell the bond, which means we don't have to tax people for that extra money. That's my point. So I want to know, what is that residual amount? How I need to know specifically. 33 million? I was going to say, I'm sorry, we're having a side conversation here. I would like just articulate on the record, what is the amount of residual project money that is being sold in these bonds?
Ma'am, that I don't know.
Maybe I can.
I mean, I could go back and crunch numbers, but standing here, I couldn't tell you exactly what that amount is.
And I appreciate it. Maybe you can help.
Yeah, may I ask a clarifying question? Which I think gets to part of Ms. Domboski's concern, which I think is a reasonable one. Are each of the projects to which these residual funds going toward previously voter-approved bonded projects, and we're just shifting money within the overall bond structure? Does that get it?
Yeah, that would get it.
You can't answer that question, I don't think, sir. I'm looking at your face.
Well, I can. I mean, but the answer I give you is a bit, it's incomplete, because the specific answer to your question is no. But you got to realize in many cases when the voters approve a bond, what you typically will see are the larger projects. It will be a school renovation. But within that, there's a portion that is for the emergent component maintenance requirements to sustain and maintain the district's infrastructure. So it's that detail of those smaller projects that these monies are going to. In some cases, in the district, we have continuing maintenance requirements. I mean, it never ends, right? Anybody who owns a home understands that you have to invest in your real property. So the district does have the authority in the bond language to redirect these monies that are residual from approved projects to continue to maintain and sustain the infrastructure.
I'm very familiar. I refer to that language as squirrely language. I don't, so I know exactly. I mean, the legal thing is there. It says, or, the appropriation language is at the bottom of every bond in the fine print. But that's the heart of what I'm trying to get at is, I understand it's there. I understand it's legal to do. But I think the intent in big, bold, when people are voting for a school project on this particular area, if you have $5 million left over, they don't intend for it to go to a different school to upgrade security if they're building a school over here. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. I just wanted to understand how much of that money was being appropriated. If I could get an answer to that question, maybe it's de minimis, as they like to use that word, and I could weigh that against the totality of the bonds being sold. But without that number, I think that's an important, when we go forward and we come back to this, it's going to be a question that's always asked. So it would be very helpful because then I can weigh it. Right now I can't weigh it. I have no way to do that. And so it's very challenging. I hope that's helpful. So thank you for your...
Thank you. Members, ma'am. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've managed to get confused here a little bit. To me, residual money is money that's left over from a bond that's already been sold for a project that's been built and completed and came in under budget. What we're talking about here are bonds that have never been sold for projects that the community have voted on and approved. So there is no residual money in this $79 million. Am I correct?
Through the chair, Mr. Hall, I suppose there would be residual bond authorization remaining. This is all money we have not spent but have the voters have authorized.
Anything else, Mr. Hall?
No, I'm clear in my mind. Thank you.
Ms. Johnston, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Riswell. Ross? What would be, what would happen if this item was postponed for 2 weeks? What would be the cost of that? Or could you tell us?
Well, we've planned the, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Johnston, we've planned the bond issue at this time of year because of the interest rate environment. it's a good time to issue the debt, and we certainly recommend that we proceed with the debt issuance. It's not really, I don't really think we can quantify what would happen if it was delayed 2 weeks. It just depends on which way the market goes with interest rates, if that's the cost that you're referring to.
Ms. Johnston?
Over the last 2 months, what has been the variance as far as interest rates?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Johnston, the interest rates over the past couple of months have moved immaterially to make a determination whether we should have issued it 30 days ago or today or 2 weeks from now. But
Sir, speak into your mic, would you please? We're getting old, some of us.
The market has moved immaterially over the last 30 to 45 days, so that's not an issue. The anticipation that the Fed is going to raise rates continues to be there. It's been there for many years, and yes, someday they may do that. But right now, it hasn't been a material impact on the cost of overall cost of our debt. I might point out, if I may, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Johnston, that on page 3 of the ordinance in question here, actually page 3 of the school district ordinance 2015-117, on page 3 of that ordinance, there are sample proposition languages in there from representing what we went to the voters for and what they approved. And on the second paragraph of the proposition number 2 that is laid out on page 3, the last phrase in paragraph 2, it says, but not limited to the projects described above. So when the projects that were associated with the $34.3 million on that proposition, there was a project list. And there is a caveat here in paragraph 2 that says they're not limited to those projects described above. But we do have an obligation to complete those projects, or alternatively make a determination that if those projects are no longer economical or desirable by the school district, then those funds, as Ms. Domowski has pointed out, can be moved to other projects. And that is the intent of the language in paragraph 2. It is the language that's been there for many years, as long as I've been here, over 11 years, and the Assembly does have the opportunity to change that language, but I believe that they have rightfully and correctly left it that way. Bond Council has represented to us that every local school district, literally in America, uses this concept so that if they pass some bonds that where projects are completed, perhaps they come in under budget, or there's a scope change that brings them under budget, then those unused authorization amounts can be used for other school district capital projects. And that's the intent of this language. And it was the intent of this language that was in Proposition 2 that's on page 3. And so I fully support and recommend that the Assembly do pass this proposed bond issue that was put before the voters by the Assembly and subsequently authorized by the voters.
Mr. Chair, one further question. We have 2 bond packages on tonight's agenda. And would there be additional cost of going forward with one and then postponing another?
Yes, there would, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Johnston, yes, there would be a cost. Well, we would postpone both bond issues. I mean, it's one bond issue with 2 series, one series for new money for the school district and one series for new money for general government, general purpose bonds. We also have in this bond issue We are planning on refunding some bonds for schools, and we are planning on refunding some general purpose bonds for general government, and the time is right to do that. And so it's a 4-series bond issue, and we would not split the bond issue, do a bond issue now and do a bond issue 2 weeks later or a month later. We would just postpone everything at this point.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I thank you for the clarification. While I really appreciate the points that both Mr. Starr and Ms. Frambowski have raised, I feel that personally, I've been negligent because I've had this agenda for a while, and it should have been on my radar to ask you these questions before this evening. But I do think that as a school district, you should be aware of the issue, and it would be helpful to be prepared to do a better job of itemizing what these bonds are for. And it has been the way we've been doing business. So, you know, there is that some of that rests on our shoulders. I personally think that the feds aren't meeting soon, and the interest rates aren't going to change much in 2 weeks, but I understand Mr. Roswell's angst over this, and because of all of that, I will be a yes vote.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Steele, sir, comments on this item so we can get on to voting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no doubt that the bonds in these two packages have been scrutinized. I believe what is happening, and it's speculation on my part, is that people are fearful that the state is going to renege on matching or the payment of the debt, and they want to get it done before that. And so I think there are some projects in here that were certainly on their capital project list that are things that we looked at and that we knew were in there, but may not have gone to the voters yet, may not have been approved by this body. I guess I can't argue with the idea that they want to have that money in hand, and like I said, I have no doubt that they will spend it wisely, but there's a little technicality, I think, that according to the testimony, at least some of it has not gone to the voters yet. So,
thank you, sir.
If I'm wrong, tell me.
Mr. Honeman.
I just wanted to re-clarify my question from earlier, and I think I've got it on the page, and I apologize, as Ms. Johnson said, I have had the agenda, but I hadn't had the opportunity to ask the specifics. 2015, we had the new, if you will, approach from the legislature and their positioning or stance, philosophy, much as we changed ours tonight on how we do our revenue. Prior to that, 2014 and earlier, these 2007, 8, 12, 14 bonds, is it your position, and it's for us to know, to tell our constituents, those if we were to go to bond with those, if those are approved, those meet the debt reimbursement of either 60 or 70%, correct?
Through the chair, yes, sir. We believe that is correct, that the state will reimburse us for those 2014 and prior. 2015, the proposal there was the only one that we think is in question at this point.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I certainly have concerns about the 2015 bond package simply because I don't think the state's going to put the reimbursement in, which means it's going to be about 3 times more expensive for the average taxpayer per $100,000 than would otherwise be. But the fact is that was discussed before the vote. People were aware that that was a possibility and yet went ahead and approved the bonds. I wish we wouldn't bond so much, but we've done it. The voters have approved it, and I think it's our responsibility at this time to enact that further and go ahead and sell the bonds.
Thank you, sir. No other comments from some members? We'll begin the voting on this item. Mr. Starr, you're first. I'm sorry. Ms. Dombowski.
Oh, thank you. I refrained from some of my comments just in case people had questions for the school district. I don't have any questions for you. Thank you. But I would like to say, you know, when I hear people reference the not limited to language, To me, that's the squirrely language. I mean, when you put something in big, bold letters that says, we want to build a new Clark Middle School, and then down here it says, oh, by the way, if we want, we can put the money somewhere else. To me, that's just it's not right. Historically, we've seen the school district, when Superintendent Como was there, they took extra money that was left over from a project, and they brought it back to the voters to say, hey, can we reappropriate this to another project? The voters said no. And ever since that, we have never gone back to the voters to ask them if we can move the money from one project to another. I think that's very telling. And, you know, when I sit in front of the school district and I ask a very specific question about how much money was left over from other projects and where are we reappropriating it, and you can't answer the question, that's a problem for me. You know, one of these days I will be successful in getting that squirrely language off the ballot, because I think every voter has the right to vet the projects and weigh them and choose whether they want to pay for them or not. But to not give them the opportunity and shuffle the money around, frankly, the words that are coming into my mind I can't say, but it's frustrating. So I will be a no vote. And this is a message that I am sending right now, loud and clear. The voters have a right to choose what projects get funded, and the government doesn't have a right to shuffle it around. It may be legal, that squirrely language is in there, but it doesn't make it right.
Thank you, Amy. We'll now go on to vote on this item. Mr. Starr, can you vote again, sir? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm still a no vote, Mr. Chairman.
Next item in front of us is item 14C, Ordinance AO 2015-118, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $53,500,000 in aggregate principal amount of general obligation, general purpose bonds for the municipality for the purpose of financing the costs of road and drainage improvements, renovating and replacing and renewing park facilities, public safety transportation improvements, and related capital improvements, projects in the municipality, delegating certain matters to the Chief Fiscal Officer in conjunction with the sale of the bonds, authorizing the Chief Fiscal Officer to confirm the matter of sale of the bonds.
Waive reading.
The full faith and credit. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify? Please come forward, state your name, clear for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of Anchorage you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Discussion from assembly members. Ms. Dombowski, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want a confirmation from the administration. Is this a straight out just issuing the bonds that were voter approved, or do we have funds that we're moving around? Just like I asked at the school district. Can somebody answer that for me? I think I know the answer, but I just want a confirmation.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Dombowski, I'd be glad to answer that question if you wouldn't mind repeating it.
Oh, I just want confirmation that the bonds that we're issuing today for these projects are specifically for the projects that were approved, or are there funds commingled within here that are being appropriated to projects that weren't necessarily approved by the voters?
Well, Mr. Trainee and Ms. Dombowski, the debt that will be issued for under this ordinance is $53.5 million. They are from a variety of propositions that had project lists associated with them. Those project lists were vetted by the administration, and they were approved by the assembly, and then put before the voters, and they were passed by the voters. And those are the projects that we are obligated to do first and foremost. And if there are funds left over after doing those projects, then those funds will be moved to other projects within the department. For example, if Parks and Rec project comes a little bit under budget for a project, those funds will be moved to a Parks and Rec alternative project.
Ma'am?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Anything else, ma'am? No. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Johnston, ma'am.
I just would want to clarify if there are funds left over and say in the Parks and Rec Department and they were reappropriated, that would come before the Assembly, the reappropriation.
Mr. Trainee and Ms. Johnston, I don't believe that there is a reappropriation of funds. The funds have already, the funds under every one of these propositions that we're issuing debt for, we're issuing a piece of debt for a variety of propositions here. And all of those funds in entirety have already been appropriated by the Municipal Assembly. And if there is a surplus of funds from a project that perhaps comes in under budget, those funds are moved to another capital project within the department without going back to the Assembly for reappropriation. That is my understanding of how the process works.
Ms. Johnston?
I'm just thinking here. And most capital projects are, in some way, will be coming, it usually has some clearance or some approval by the Assembly, either through a CIP or through, I'm just saying that this, we have a couple of bites, or the Assembly has a couple of bites at this apple.
That is
Mr.
correct.
Chairman,
Yeah.
Ms. Johnston, I do believe you're correct. I do believe that all capital projects go through the CIP process through the Assembly.
Anything else, ma'am? Mr. Flynn, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Johnson kind of got to the heart of this, which is this is a little bit different than the school district bonds. We're talking about service areas, and service area bonds, ARDSA, for example, are just area-wide road and drainage projects. There's usually very little definition associated with that, and they get prioritized. We do the same for Subversa, Anchorage Parks and Recs, and so on. So I'm a little, I think this is a more, a little less discomforting than perhaps what we just dealt with, and it's probably an appropriate way to phrase things.
Mr. Starr, any comment on this item, sir?
I have no comment, thanks.
Ms. Dombowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just going to reassure Mr. Flynn and Ms. Johnston that I got that. I knew it. I just wanted to put it on the record. This is definitely different than the ASD one, and I will be voting yes on this one.
Okay, any other comments from Assembly members? If not, we're going to start voting. Mr. Starr.
Yes.
Please vote. Item is approved unanimously. Next item in front is item 14D, ordinance AO 2015-99, and ordinance authorizing disposal by a perpetual, non-exclusive underground utility easement on Heritage Land Bank parcel 1-076, located at 14040 Old Glen Highway, Negro River, to the General Communications Incorporated at less than fair market value, PID 015-314-13. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name and career for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and so knowing, seeing no one, what's the wish of the Assembly?
Move to approve.
Second.
Comments? We'll vote then. Mr. Starr first, sir.
Yes.
Please vote. That's all right, sir. That's approved unanimously. Next item, our first item, 14A, Resolution Air 2015-257, a resolution approving the Heritage Land Bank 2015 Annual Work Program and the 2016 to 2020 5-year management plan from Real Estate Department. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name and career for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Assembly. My name is Kathy Gleason with a C, Gleason, and I live in Turnagain. And I just wanted to let the Assembly know that the Heritage Land Bank Advisory Commission was really thoughtful in their handling of the Turnagain Community Council comments that we approved at our May meeting, but somehow didn't get to them in time for them to review. So at their commission meeting, they postponed their advisory approval of these two plans to allow for both staff and the commissioners to review our comments, and then they went ahead and gave their advisory commission vote in July. That was very considerate of them. It was just a bungle on our part as far as who was getting our comments to them. They did not incorporate all of our comments, but they did incorporate some, and we always appreciate the opportunity to provide input to these two important plans for the HLB land that the municipality has in its possession. There's still some parcels that Turnagain feels like should become dedicated parkland within that document, and we hope maybe in the near future, maybe into next year, we can work with the Parks Department to get that work through the system and get that done. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no questions, ma'am. Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify on this item, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one? Public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Discussion from Assembly members.
I have a question on approval necessarily. The authorizations, Mr. Chairman, could you clarify the authorizations for the transactions will come back to us one by one as the HLB perhaps does land negotiations?
Let me check on that.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, the answer is yes.
Okay, so approval is more acceptance than Mr. Chairman or Mr. Abbott?
Code requires us to bring you the plan for your adoption, and that's the step that's before you, but any individual transaction would be governed by code, and code requires that the Assembly be involved in essentially any transfer of interest in municipal property.
Okay, so I don't see anything in here where we encumbered funds. We don't do an encumbrance here? Is that there's no encumbrance or appropriation tied to this?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, no, this is not an appropriation.
Great, thank you. That's all I needed.
Bill, it was kind of like if you look at 14D, that came to us as an individual item. I'm sure it was in the last 5-year plan. So they do come to us as individual approvals for the land.
Yeah, I got clarity. I just wanted to make sure that the administration, the new administration court kind of had that same policy statement. So Mr. Abbott clarified that's what they intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're about to vote. You can be the first one.
I say yes.
Okay, please vote. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14F, ordinance 2015-115, an ordinance authorized disposal by lease of Heritage Land Bank parcel 3-073 to the Alaska Work Source for lot 32A, block 10, Alaska Industrial Subdivision number 1, plat 14-141, PID 004-053-08, located at 3001 Porcupine Drive, for less than fair market value, Real Estate Department. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. Hearing and seeing no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
And it's moved and seconded by who? Ms. Johnston. Mr. Flynn, sir.
I just wanted to take a moment. This is a good one, and I want to say thank you to the Real Estate Department for taking the time to reach out to Mountain View Community Council and do a good job of ensuring that it's cohesive with the neighborhood plan. And I think come up with a good answer for a property that was perhaps not originally did not originally have a well-intended use, and I think we found a better one. So thank you for that, Tammy. Good work.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Holman, sir.
Yes, thank you, and I thank Mr. Flynn for his position on this, because I know that in the past, a lot of services, and particularly the services for the homeless, are in generally his area, a large percentage, not all, but a large percentage, and particularly where people congregate in large numbers. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the opportunity for the tenants to rehabilitate the building with an exchange for the lease of this building and property for the purposes. So it's kind of kudos all around, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Before we vote, I remember, Mr. Flynn, the last time something like this came up, you said, I'll remind all the assembly members, this can't be just stuck in my area. It needs to be spread around town.
Well, this is job retraining, so this is good stuff.
I know, but I'm going to anticipate you bringing it to us when issues come up.
Yeah, no, this is a good one. And just for those, Ms. Domboski asked me what was the original intent. It was supposed to, the previous administration had floated the idea of using it as a warehouse for items seized from homeless individuals, which I did not find a particularly attractive use of the property.
Yeah, I remember. Okay, if we're done discussing this, let's vote on it. Mr. Starr first.
Yes.
Please vote. That is approved by the body. Next item in front of us.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
I'd like to move to combine the public hearing on items 14H through 14O.
We got to get to 14G.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
We
what I
had
was
G.
announcing
Sorry.
next. Is that all right?
I jumped ahead. My apologies.
You're fast.
But I'll second that.
We now have a public hearing open on 14G, Ordinance AO 2015-116, Ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 3.88, to extend the time period for the pre-funding investment program from the Office of Management and Budget. Anybody wish to testify on this item, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record, spell your last name, and tell us what part of town you live in. Welcome to the meeting. You'll have 3 minutes.
Cleo Hill, Hill, from the east side of town. I'm here representing Don Crone, the chairman of the Police and Fire Medical Trust Program. I am the vice chair. With your permission, Mr. Chair and esteemed members of the Assembly, I'd like to read his statement. The Municipality of Anchorage Retiree Medical Funding Program Trust for Police Officers and Firefighters. The board requests that the Assembly not approve AO 2015-116, which extends the funding period and reduces the current annual municipal contribution. Additionally, the board urges the Assembly to consider reclassifying the pre-funding account to a trust. As a fiduciary account, the pre-funding trust would be safeguarded for its designated purpose, protected from the creditors of the municipality, and prevent legal action. Historically, police officers and firefighters were promised the medical plan provided during employment would be the same medical plan available in retirement. Unfortunately, the municipality elected to fund the retiree medical plan on a pay-as-you-go basis. This created an unfunded liability for the municipality. As a result of this unfunded liability, in 1994, the police officers and firefighters agreed to significant concessions, and the Municipality of Anchorage's Retiree Medical Funding Program Trust was created. As a result, the pre-funding account, 313, was established to permanently fund the program trust, with the municipality agreeing to fully fund the program's obligation by 2014. Then, in 2009, the municipality of Anchorage added another 7 years and agreed to continue contributing the same amount, approximately $1.8 million, which is currently built into the municipal budget. The annual contribution was then again lowered in 2013 to approximately $1.5 million. Now the administration is once again requesting to add on additional years, in this case 13 years, and reduce the annual contribution to the program. If AO 2015-116 is passed, the original time frame agreed upon in 1994 for the municipality to completely fund the unfunded liability will be doubled and returns to the pay-as-you-go concept. The board does not support AO 2015-116 because it fails to fully fund the program trust as originally agreed upon by the municipality of Anchorage.
Is that all, ma'am?
That's all.
Do you mind some questions?
Go ahead.
Ms. Dembowski, ma'am?
Thank you, Ms. Hill. The board met on this and discussed this ordinance, is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you tell me, I'm assuming there was a board resolution. Can you tell me if how the vote went? Was it unanimous?
The vote was unanimous that we not support this.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson has a question, ma'am.
Thank
Good
you,
to
Mr.
see you
Chairman.
again, by the way.
Thank you. Dan Moore, who serves as the administrator for this, was real helpful because, as you know, we've gotten lots of emails, and he was really helpful and provided some explanation. Have you seen his comments?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Okay, and what are your thoughts on his comments?
I'm not sure that I agree with him, Mr. Chair, Mr. Gray Jackson. Lauren Bretz, the administrator of the Police and Fire Medical Trust Program, has comments that will address Mr. Moore's comments, and also information from the trust's attorney that could aid you in your decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Johnson, you were on here and, okay. There are no questions, ma'am.
Thank
you. Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Good evening. Lauren Bretz, the plan administrator for the trust, and I'm going to stick to my written comments so I don't miss anything. As a result of the unfunded liability,
Your last name and what part of town you live in.
Lauren Bretz, B-R-E-T-Z, East Anchorage.
Go ahead, sir.
As a result of the unfunded liability, in 1994, the police officers and firefighters agreed to significant concessions, and the MOA Retiree Medical Funding Program Trust was created to distribute benefits to the membership. A separate pre-funding account, 313, was established by agreement to permanently fund the medical trust and has a current balance of approximately $35 million. The Municipality of Anchorage administration has introduced AO 2015-116, which requests a second extension to the original agreed-upon date of 2014 and substantially reduces the annual contribution from $1.5 million to approximately $782,551 required to fully fund the pre-funding account by the new 2034 date. The MOA agreed to make annual contributions to the pre-funding account with the intent of fully funding the Retiree Medical Funding Program Trust obligation by 2014. In 2009, the municipality added another 7 years to the funding time frame. The explanation on the summary of economic effects was to allow the municipality to continue contributing the same annual amount that was built into the budget, $1.9 million. In 2013, they reduced the annual contribution to 1.5. Had they maintained the prior funding level of 1.9, 1.8 funding, they would have completed this obligation by 2019. The pre-funding account is not an asset that has been segregated and restricted in a trust where the assets are dedicated and providing benefits to the retirees. It is not legally protected from the creditors of the municipality. The trust board is recommending that the administration and the assembly strongly consider maintaining the current fully fund date and reclassifying the pre-funding account to a trust fiduciary account. This would allow the MOA to report the pre-funding account on the MOA consolidated annual financial statements as an asset funding the actuarially accrued liability due to the medical trust. As it stands now, by the Government Accounting Standards Board standards, this is still a fully unfunded liability. The Medical Trust Board determined that AO 2015-116
Can you finish it up quickly?
it does not comply with the original agreement between the membership and the municipality. Furthermore, our attorney, the trust attorney, rendered an opinion. The municipal treasurer, who serves as the administrator of the pre-funding account and as a medical trust board trustee.
Can you just send us a copy of that? Because for you to read it off will take more time. You just send us a copy of that. We have some questions for you. Jennifer?
Yes. Who pays your salary?
By agreement, it's out of the current operating budget of the municipality of Anchorage.
Okay. And what percentage of funding, full funding, are we at currently?
0.
How much did you say the balance was?
Until the money in the pre-funding is a trust, it cannot legally, by Government Accounting Standards Board, be declared as an asset that can count against the actuarially accrued liability. It is money that is set aside.
So with our set aside, what percentage of funding are we at?
Without being satisfying the criteria of the Standards Board?
Without the guess, yes.
Ms. Johnson?
No, okay. It's not a trust, but there is $35 million there. And what is, let's say it was a trust, what is the full funding?
I think we're about 75%.
Okay, which is really within the norm. Right now, that's the standard.
If it was restricted, it would be 25% unfunded.
Okay, thank you.
Underfunded.
Okay, thank you.
Lynch Dombowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Retz, there was reference to Dan Moore's comments, and they said that you could address those comments. I'm not familiar with what his comments were. Can you address whatever it was that the other assembly member brought up?
Yes. If I could finish this last paragraph, it would address the comments. Basically, Dan Moore advocating the position of the municipality for extending the funding of the trust, or extending the funding of pre-funding, is in direct. It exposes the trust to liability because he's wearing his treasurer hat, advocating for the municipality, and he's also a trustee on the board. That is a direct conflict of interest. A trustee has the obligation to assure that the funding for the retirees is in place, secured. For him to advocate anything else puts the trust in a fiduciary breach liability situation, and that can be brought by any member of the trust.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Bretz, you're familiar, of course, with the language in 2015-116, and it strictly addresses the pre-funding investment program and board with the funding rate of return and the years to fully fund. I believe it's around $44 million is the fully funded amount. Is that correct? Roughly?
Roughly.
Okay. So if we were to try at this body, at this juncture, to change this program to a trust, it certainly wouldn't be through this document. So
no.
We would have to introduce something new. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you're saying there's, I guess what I want to make sure it's been done before. There's been a comment said in one of the responses to the municipal treasurer that in about the last time this was done during the Sullivan administration, where they postponed the repayment, that the trust board did not object to it at that time. Is that correct?
That is correct. They did not make a comment. Also at that time, it was 2009 was right after the stock market crash, serious fluctuation in the value of the assets. The treasurer had said that they'd continue the current funding balance or annual funding. That did not happen. The thought was that we'd get paid up sooner than 2021.
Thank you.
That's all the questions we have, sir. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, my name is Terry L. Markwood. I'm a trust member of the board, and I'm here this evening as a fiduciary of that board. And I feel if I wasn't here this evening representing other trustees, that indeed I would be negligent in my official duties. As a fiduciary responsibility, I believe that 2015-116 is not in keeping with the original agreement, because we are not funding this. We're kicking it out further and further and further, and the debt becomes further and further and further. And I've received numerous phone calls from members of the trust that are telling me we've had cities all across the United States failing to properly fund these agreements, and by that, we wind up with the same problem we ran into in 1994 with the municipality of Anchorage when they were saying, oh, everything's fine, you guys got full medical care. When I came on board, that was what was represented to me, that I'd have lifetime medical care, et cetera, and it did not happen. And the reason was that they started tapping into the monies and not fully funding these things. Additionally, has been as a point raised this evening, we have seen that the state of Alaska is not funding back to the municipality. There are no shared funds anymore. And my members that are talking to me are telling me that they are very, very concerned about this. Police officers and firefighters gave their all. This administration has said, we are friends to police and fire. This assembly has said, we are friends to police and fire. But at the same time, we are putting this situation with the reduced funding of our trust in a very bad situation. I'm asking you to reject AO 2015-116. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. We have a few questions for you.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Bowski, ma'am?
Thank you, sir. I didn't hear your last name.
Marquardt, M-A-R-Q-U-A-R-T.
Margaret. Can you tell me, from your perspective, you've obviously been reached out to by members of the trust, and have you had anybody that's reached out to you that's in support of this ordinance?
No, ma'am.
And as a trustee, can you confirm for me, this trust was established by law?
Yes, ma'am.
It was a court case that established it. Can you just articulate for me very quickly how it was established? So this isn't something that we voluntarily did.
No, this was as a result of the municipality failing to properly fund the medical care for police and fire back in about 1994. And the police and fire department negotiated with the municipality, and they came to an agreement that funded the trust and started the trust in 1994, 1998.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted you to get that on the record because I knew the history of it, but I wanted everybody else to hear it. So it's your position then as a trustee of this trust, who has, the municipality doesn't have the fiduciary responsibility to the trust. You do, as a trustee.
Yes, ma'am.
It's your position and the position of the other trustees on this board that this is not in the best interest of the trust. Is
That is correct.
Thank you.
There are no other questions, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome, sir.
Chair and Assembly, my name is Greg Stewart, G-R-E-G-S-T-E-W-A-R-T, East Anchorage. I am a member, standing board member of the Police and Fire Medical Trust, the Retiree Trust, and I'm here to represent my position on the board. To clarify a couple of the other comments that were made by my fellow board members, the trust has funds in it that are transferred from the pre-funding account on an annual basis. Usually they're done on a monthly basis. The pre-funding account was agreed upon in the original agreement to be funded and ended be completely funded by 2014. And the unfunded liability that existed for the municipality at that time, after over $140 million in concessions by the police and fire members, still exists today because this pre-funding account is not a trust and is not protected. And the smoke and mirrors part of this ordinance is that Mr. Moore's comments are that it is the intent of the municipality to continue making payments from the pre-funding account, that $35 million lump sum money, annually by monthly payments to the medical trust, and all the members will still receive their benefits, whatever the monthly amount is, because it varies on different members. The reason the board is against this particular ordinance is because it continues and reverts right back to where the municipality was back in 1994, kicking the can down the road. We're going to take add another 20 years to what was already agreed upon contractually and make this a 40-year commitment to pay back. And now we went from 1.9 to about $780,000 to contribute to the pre-funding account. Yes, the money that the municipality intends to pay the trust every month will be there. However, this unfunded liability is still there for the municipality. And I believe that the Assembly should be aware that nothing has changed. You still have 100% unfunded liability today as you did in 1994. That has not gone away. And that's why the board would like to request that there be a workshop for us to be able to present our, the information that we have so that the Assembly can make a more informed decision. And I might add that Mr. Dan Moore is on the board. However, he has been absent from the majority of the meetings in the last year. This is the second time that the Medical Trust Board has become aware of an ordinance being presented to the Assembly by outside sources. We were never approached by the municipality and offered an explanation about what's going on with these two ordinances. The other one was defeated. And so it would really be nice to have an opportunity for the board to present at a workshop the information that we have. And I think that the municipality and the Assembly would be a lot better off if they realized that a trust would actually protect everybody, including the Assembly. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. We have some questions. Ms. Dombrowski?
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my question to you, is were the trustees actually engaged, and did they come to the table to address this? And your answer is no. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think your idea of a workshop is a good one. Unfortunately, I had another meeting that ran over. I was going to come to your last meeting just to hear what the trustees were saying, and I'm sorry I missed it. But I think from the perspective of the other Assembly members, I've been to your meetings before. I've gone with Assembly Council before, and this is an engaged group of individuals. So I think that's a good idea, and I'll try to push for that. We'll see where it goes tonight. But my question for you is, people talk about the $35 million that you have right now, basically in this fund. The trustees, those monies are invested and managed by the Board of Trustees, correct?
Not the $35 million.
Okay.
The $35 million is managed by Mr. Moore and the pre-funding account. That money is what the municipality operating budget pays into. And then out of that money, because that was the municipality's promise to make the trust whole and get rid of their unfunded liability. So that lump of money is designed or was designated to get rid of that unfunded liability by 2014. But because they've reduced the payments and extended the time out to pay that unfunded liability is not made whole. And by it not being a trust, it's money that could be seized by creditors.
Sure, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other questions, sir. Thank you. If we have a work session, can you give me the attendance record of all the trustees?
Yes.
Thank you. It's my intention to get one. Thank you, sir. Okay. Anybody else wish to testify on this item? Mr. Steele?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just would like to ask the administration, is this $35 million fund, is it invested in anything? Is it earning money?
If we can get that answer when we get a debate, that'll be good, Tim. Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Thank you. Billy Ray Powers, POWERS, UMed District. I think what we're talking about here is Tier 1 and 2 cops retirement system. Is that correct?
No. No.
This is all tiers?
Anchorage Police and Fire Retirement System plan members, tiers 1, 2, and 3. Plans 1, 2, and 3. After 1994.
After 1994. All right, I'll sit down. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to testify on this item, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Honeman.
I'd like to move to postpone this item to the meeting of November 10th.
Second.
And request a work session on this.
I've asked the clerk
double
to set the
second.
work session up. If your motion is successful, I want the work session. Anything, Mr. Mowski?
Oh, yes. Can I speak to the postponement?
Yes.
Thank you.
Who was the second on the postponement?
Yes, I was the second on the postponement. Mr. Chair, I recognize this may be very innocent and may just be something that has people nervous, but the fact of the matter is there was a promise made to retirees, police and fire, and I think the city will live up to that. Regardless of the funding level, I think they will. But I can tell you the angst that I've seen come across my computer with the number of emails that I've received, which is a lot, they're very nervous. They're very nervous because the Board of Trustees wasn't even engaged on this topic when it first came up. These are retirees. You have to recognize this is their medical trust. This is how they get their health care paid. And especially as you get on in years, I guess I would say, the medical expenses are very, very daunting on a family. And anytime they see any ambiguity or any potential for the government to potentially not live up to their obligation, it makes them all very nervous. And I think we have a responsibility not only to vet this thoroughly, but to let them come to the table and talk to us about it. So I strongly urge that we have a work session, we get them at the table, because we do have to remember, this isn't like the Assembly has control necessarily. The Board of Trustees, they have a legal requirement. They're the fiduciaries of this trust. And I think because we are delving into this arena of how much we're funding it, one gentleman got up and said we were funding it at 1.9 million a number of years ago, and then it got reduced to 1.5, and now we're going down to 782,000. As a trustee, I would be very nervous about that. So I think just because of the amount of contribution we're talking about and the diminishing the contribution every year, I think that's something that we owe them at least that much to sit down at the table and talk to them about it. So I approve I encourage postponement.
Good. Mr. Honeman, on the issue of postponement.
Yes, and I just wanted to make sure it's on the record to the trustees that are here tonight, and maybe any members that are listening and paying attention. I haven't ignored you specifically. I did intentionally not comment on this, not knowing whether or not I would be able to participate in this discussion and or the vote until tonight's meeting. So I will respond to the inquiries and give the position. This is about trust. I do believe that one of the concerns I have is we had a 20-year pre-funding program in place when the agreement was made. It was kicked out to 27 years. Now the projection is kicking it out to 40, which doubles the initial obligation. I might add that I think it was said that if everything had stayed on track, maybe in as early as last year, but certainly in the next year or two, the municipal taxpayers would not have had any further obligations had we kept on track with the payments. So that money we could, this administration or the previous one, would have been able to use for other purposes as they've specifically intended the purposes of the money saved here. So I do want to have the work session, and I'd encourage you guys to keep an open mind, and I have much more to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Starr.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just would not want the work session to turn into continued debate. I would hope that, along with Mr. Steele's pertinent question, we would actually have a summary of the actuarial tables, the actuarial study, rather, that occurred that probably led to some of this discussion. And I'd hope it's a business decision and a cash flow management discussion. Certainly, as Ms. Dombowski says, we're not here to short anybody upon the need to pay these, but also not only the actuarial calculations, but a summary of the payout requirements for the municipality and what would be a best case, a worst case, and another scenario would be the structure of the work session that I would like to see, rather than just a little bit more a passion expressed. I'm certainly getting those messages too, as Mr. Honeman is alluded to, but I'd rather see some of the justification from a business decision perspective structured at the work session.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. If this motion to postpone goes forward, I will create a 2-hour work session on this item, because I'm prior military and I saw our health care benefits we were promised evaporate by a Congress that looked the other way. And so
let's debate just a minute, Mr. Chairman. It does, in fact, dishearten folks when that occurs, but by the same token, that if we hurry up and fund it into an investment account, if there is one that exists, and it rapidly loses money, we also have a fiduciary responsibility to protect against that. So I would actually entertain the inflation-proofing conversation that occurs with it, not in essence to change the agreement that occurred in '94, but to assure that we've kept up with some of the studies, not just the actuarial, but the investment management accounts as well. So, I'm with you on the conversations that occurred. I wouldn't package it, in the tone that you did, that there's a deliberate misholding here. You've got another administration that's still presenting the concept, so there must be some valid nature in the cash flow management. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Dombowski, before we get on the vote.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly ask Rose, our budget analyst. I didn't have a chance to get back with you because I was thinking this would be postponed, but were you successful in getting the actuarial studies that I had requested? Oh, good. She's shaking her head. Yes, Mr. Starr. So that information is going to be available to the Assembly through our budget analyst.
Well, thanks for that clarity. I needed to explain, though, if you've read one of those, it's not always easy for the common person to understand. So thank you.
We'll talk about it. Okay. Thank you. Please vote on the extension. Mr. Starr?
Yes to postpone till a date certain.
Please vote. November 10th. We'll have a work session, 2-hour work session between now and then. We'll try and get the information and questions that some members have answered. Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
I'll try again, Mr. Chairman. See if I can get it right this time. I move to combine the public hearing on items 14H through 14O.
Is there a second?
Second.
Now, this is approved. What it will mean is you'll be able to testify on all the budgets in front of us, but I'm going to give more time. Thanks to Ms. Dombowski. We normally have 3 minutes. We're going to do 5 minutes because some people want to testify on the budget, operating budget, someone doing the capital. So we're going to try this, Amy, and see if it works better, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman?
We'll go that. Yes, sir.
For the benefit of the students in here, this is your municipal budget we're working on for the coming year, and it's broken down into different categories. So this is where the money comes from, and you or your parents are having to pay in taxes and fees and fines and such.
Okay, there's a motion in front of us by Mr. Flynn to combine the public hearing and open it. There was a motion and a second. Mr. Starr? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. Who are we missing? There. Okay. We've combined the hearing. Now we've opened the public hearing on 14I, actually 14H. AO 2015-106, ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting and approving funds for the 2016 general government operating budget. We've opened the public hearing. We're open the public hearing now on 14I, ordinance AO 2015-107, ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the 2016 municipal utilities / enterprise activities operating budgets and the 2016 municipal utilities enterprise activities capital budgets. We open the public hearing on item 14J, AO 2015-108, an ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the 2016 operating and capital budget of the Anchorage Community Development Authority. We open the public hearing on item 14K, or AO 2015-109, an ordinance adopting the 2016 General Government Capital Improvement Budget. Open the public hearing on item 14L, Resolution AR 2015-271, ordinance adopting the 2016-2021 General Government Capital Improvement Program. Open the public hearing on item 14M, Resolution 2015-272, a resolution approving the 2016-2021 Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Capital Improvement Program. Item 14N, Resolution AR 2015-273, resolution adopting the 2016-2021 six-year fiscal program. Open the public hearing on item 14O, ordinance 2015-112, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code chapters 3.20 and 3.30 relating to the organization of the executive branch and setting forth utilities responsibilities of the executive branch agencies. Office of Management Budget. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. You'll have 5 minutes.
Okay. My name is Allegra Hamer, Allegra Hamer. I live in Midtown, but I'm here as the current chair of the Animal Control Advisory Board. And I'm speaking to the operating budget, specifically for the resolution in support of additional animal control officers. I'm not going to read all the reasons that we set forth in the resolution, but I'd just like to reiterate the extent of the problem. There's currently 6.5 animal control enforcement officers to service an area of 1,961 square miles, 7 days a week, with more than 300,000 people and at least that number of animals. Estimates of the total number of dogs alone is more than 70,000. And dogs do get most of our attention because it is true that uncontrolled dogs can pose a more direct and visible threat to public safety, both to humans and to other domestic animals. As the Assembly members, or Mr. Chair, and the rest of the Assembly is probably aware, this is not the first time we brought this resolution to your attention. Several times each year, citizens appear before either the Animal Control Advisory Board or the Public Safety Advisory Board with their concern about an uncontrolled dog in a public place, such as multi-use trails, playgrounds, designated off-leash dog parks, or in their neighborhoods. Their concerns range from continuous barking to unleashed dogs, dogs showing aggressive behavior toward people and other animals. And sometimes these appearances are quite sad, the citizens describing the death or serious injury to their beloved pet. In any case, these are citizen concerns about the quality of life and our public safety, and the board believes that they deserve our attention. Title 17 includes quite adequate and enforceable remedies and defines violations for animals issues in the municipality. However, enforceable and able to enforce are not the same thing. Enforcement depends on the number of officers, the number of calls for service under Title 17, and the priority of those calls. Through September 2013, there were a total of 3,907 calls for service, and through September 2015, there have been 4,530, which is an increase of 16%. But there has been no increase in the number of officers to answer these calls during that time. In the past, the Assembly has heard expert recommendations made to animal control calling for increasing the number of officers to 17 or more. Given the priorities in the municipality, an increase of this magnitude does not seem likely. However, the increase of only the 3 officers would provide significant increase in enforcement personnel. This would enable not only a better response to the increased calls for service under Title 17, but also enable proactive action by educating the public and/or enforcing existing codes of multi-use trails. In fact, that suggestion has been brought to the Animal Control Advisory Board by several citizens who believe even an occasional presence of an officer in areas where violations of Title 17 codes are frequent, things particularly unleashed dogs, would help reduce the problem. I just listened earlier today to the discussion that the Assembly had during the budget discussions last November, which was the last time that you guys considered this resolution. and many of you were part of those discussions. I heard and appreciate that some improvements might also be possible within a contract for animal control services, and I understand that the renegotiation of that contract is now underway. So I ask that if it is not possible to consider the additional officers at this time in the budget process, I ask that the Assembly reconsider the request in light of a new contract when it is awarded. I thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Grace Jackson has a question for you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. So
Yes,
can you tell us how long the Animal Control Office has been operating with the same number of officers?
I know that it has been I can't tell you exactly how long, but I know it has been at least 4 years.
I think it's longer than that.
I'm sure it is, but I don't have the figures.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the Assembly members? Thank you for your testimony, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. I'm Bonnie Harris, Harris. I live in South Addition. I'm here on behalf of the Federation of Community Councils. I'm serving as the chair of the Federation of Community Councils this year. And I have been involved in the community council system through South Addition, Fairview, a long time ago, and the Federation as a delegate for a number of years. What I'm here for is to urge you to support the budget request that the Federation has submitted in full for this year, for the 2016 budget. So the Community Councils Center, through the Federation, can continue providing necessary services to the more than 25 active community councils citywide, from Eagle River to Anchorage to Portage Valley. There are a number of individuals from particular councils who are here tonight to show support for the budget for continuing services of the Federation of Community Councils. Through involvement over the past decade with South Addition Community Council and as a delegate to the Federation of Community Councils, I'm familiar with the invaluable services that the Federation provides to the individual councils. It enables the councils to perform the important public process functions directed to them by the Anchorage Municipal Code, to be able, in particular, to respond timely to Title 21 requests and as the development process moves along, and the ABC board, liquor license notices, and various other things that come from the municipality. The Federation of Community Councils proposed budget for 2016 is trim for the council. There's no requested increase over past year. We work fairly constantly to keep costs down. We work with the councils to keep costs down, and we successfully have done so for the past few years. The services, among the services that the council provides, the public information distribution that it provides for all the 25-plus councils would be impossible to provide. Well, it may not be impossible to provide, but be very much more costly than the budget the council has asked for that consolidates those services to get the information out to the councils, from the councils to the public, from the public back to the councils, and back to the municipality to fill in with the process in the development and other matters. The proposed budget has the full support of the community council delegates from across Anchorage and Eagle River who voted unanimously in support of it at the last community council meeting. Like them, I'm asking that you support the budget in full. Thank you for taking time to hear me.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a few questions. Mr. Holman.
Yes, Ms. Harris. Ms. Harris? Yes. Thank you for your willingness to step up even more. I mean, I know being a delegate for your community council is one responsibility. I see one from one of my districts here, Mr. Rupke in Northeast. But I just wanted to say again, thank you, because it is in the charter that the grassroots of all what makes this municipal government go and grow, hopefully, and address the needs adequately is through our community council. So I do support the budget. We'll make sure that we'll see what the funding comes out at. But You guys do a great job working collectively as a coalition through the Federation Council's delegates. I appreciate all your efforts.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Honeman.
Mr. Steele has a question for you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. It seems to me it was last year that we increased the Federation budget slightly, and the promise to a certain extent was that they were going to try and use email for notifications as opposed to using the post office. Does your community council use email, or do you use the community or the Federation to do those postings?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Steele, if by my community council you mean South Edition, it uses both, and both are necessary in South Edition because there are a lot of older people who live in that area who aren't computer literate and just can't get the information otherwise. Some councils use only email, and the Federation for years has worked to move the councils to use more and more email, and it's a process that the email distribution is done by the Federation as well, but of course it's much less costly and less time consuming than postal mail.
Mr. Steele.
Yes. What would you like to see the budget increase to? I mean, you probably have a figure in your mind in terms of how deficient they may be.
We feel the delegates at the discussion at the Community Council felt that the proposed budget for this year would allow the Federation to adequately provide the services it has provided for the last few years with no increase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, since you are the president of the Federation, when your board of directors are meeting, Ernie and I were there at the last meeting. Ernie talked about the marijuana issue. As you know, that's going to be coming, hopefully, to community councils for them to weigh in on whether one comes into the neighborhood or not. So we're going to need to address the issue of community councils that shut down in the summertime. In the past, traditionally, I've been involved in community councils for 20 years. Community councils shut down in the summertime, but given the tight time frames, that if in fact we have a marijuana license coming in before the state issues it, there's only 60 days, I think, for you guys to comment. So we may have to have community councils step up to the plate and meet in the summer times, as we've done with Campbell Park, right behind you. They used to meet only in the summertime, but now they're meeting in the summer too. So it's just a suggestion you might take to the community councils.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Federation would be pleased to work with the Assembly to get that information out and have already started on it. What we might suggest to the councils is that they be prepared to deal with this over the summer, and many, if not all, the councils the executive board is eligible to meet, is able to meet, empowered, I should say, to meet when the council is not in session if it's necessary, and we could ask them to have that process available if it's not possible to have their councils meet timely.
We'll talk about your next meeting because I'll be there. I want to make sure they're up to speed on it. I don't want a marijuana establishment to be able to open because they had no input from the community council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We appreciate how important this is and you bringing it to our attention.
Thank you, ma'am. There are no other questions.
Thank you.
Welcome to the meeting, Kevin.
All right, thanks. Assembly Chair Trainee, also to Mr. Mayor, thanks for having me. My name is Kevin Feynman, F as in Frank, I, M as in Mary, O, N as in Nancy. I'm here as president of Campbell Park Community Council and also as the treasurer of the Federation of Community Councils. And I just wanted to also ask for your support. The budget that we did turn in, I believe, is the exact same as last year's, and I think it was 2 years ago that it did increase $5,000. To reference Mr. Steele's question. I also may remind that this is a budget that at one point in time was over 200,000, actually around 230. So compared to maybe some other places, I think we're doing pretty good on the efficiency. But the efficiency that I really want to speak to is that with one part-time employee and we have 25 very active community members, but there's actually close to 40 people that get together and work ideas, dissemination of information, working with planning and zoning, as well as coming in front of this body. I will say myself, I think it's one of the most efficient uses of $85,000 that we have going on in this community. And so I'm just saying, I think the rewards that come back when you actually have 30-some people that are volunteering to go with one worker for $85,000, I would ask for your support in the budget of SCC.
Thank you. There are no questions. Thank you, Kevin. Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Assembly. My name is Bob Rupke, R-E-U-P-K-E. I live in Northeast Anchorage, Muldoon. I'm a member of the Northeast Community Council. I've served on the board of directors for the council for about 15 years on and off as vice chair and treasurer. I'm a delegate for the council to the Federation of Community Councils. Community councils are a very important impact in our community, and they're greatly assisted by the Federation of Community Councils. The FCC emails and also snail mails their council members agendas, provides copying services, and advises the community of important meetings and events, along with the State of Alaska events. So it's all encompassing. Some of the examples that the notices are sent around is the Muldoon Town Square Park Master Plan, and also the which is a new park in our area, the old greenhouse property, which is now dedicated as a park. Thank you very much for that, Assembly members. Also, they announced the new Coastal Trail Bridge reopening on Thursday. This is not the bridge to nowhere. This is the bridge to the Coastal Trail. It's greatly appreciated. I would appreciate that the Assembly would approve the Federation of Community Councils municipal grant in the amount of $85,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Assembly members. If there aren't any, thank you for being here, sir. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Anybody else wish to testify on the budget items in front of us, please come forward. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Chair. Chair and members of the Assembly, my name is Kathy Gleason, Kathy with a C, G-L-E-A-S-O-N, and I'm from Turnagain. And I have been a long time member of the Turnagain Community Council for 33 years, and have served as the council delegate to the Federation of Community Councils way back in the day, and then more recently for several years. And I was president of the council from 2011 to 2013. And I'm no longer Turnagain's delegate, but I go to all the meetings because I find them so informative, and it's a wonderful opportunity to interact with council representatives from all over Anchorage and the municipality, and that's a great opportunity to share information and hear discussions about what's going on in all parts of our city. I certainly, especially when I was president, could not have done the work that I did without the support of the Federation of Community Councils. There's just no way that a volunteer can juggle all of that stuff and have to do it independently, or certainly nothing I could have handled. And so I urge you to support the full request from the delegates of the $85,000 request in the budget. Unfortunately, Turnagain is one of those councils that still has one of the biggest snail mail lists of all the councils. But just as Bonnie stated, we periodically ask our council members, would you be willing to go to all email? And haven't done it for a while, but I'll ask at a meeting when I was president, how many of you get the email notice versus snail mail, and can you switch over to email? And there's always several people that say, I want to get it by postal mail. So I think that it's a small price to pay to keep our council members informed in Turnagain and everywhere else where there's still a need for that mode of communication from councils to residents and members of the council. And on another topic, as far as the capital budget, I'm really, really pleased to see that Turnagain Boulevard is slated under the PM&E budget to get funding for 2016. That has been one of the top priority road projects in Turnagain for quite some time. And just about a month ago or so, when we started getting heavy rains, once again, that street was flooded, and it has been doing that for many years. It definitely needs some drainage upgrades. We need sidewalk on both sides of the street, and some proper maintenance and proper surfacing of that. I'm sure that will be a big task, but with the budget amount, I'm hopeful that that will take care of a lot of the problems on that road. There's a few other Turnagain projects in the Parks and Rec and PM&E list that our council has supported through our CIP list that we review and prioritize and approve every year. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Kathy. Anybody else wish to testify in front of the Assembly? Welcome to the meeting, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. My name is Sharon Cisna, and I am speaking as an aging member of the Airport Heights community and a person, speaking of the aging, it's really wonderful to have spent 3.5 decades in a community with a growing community council that really has shaped that community and given it a strength, and to having taken on enormous problems over the years. And I came into that community as a person that had been raised by a family that was very concerned about business and very concerned about community. And then as I was working my way through college in Seattle, I was a staff on in the Boeing Company personnel department during the time that they were going through the enormous amounts of layoffs. And remember reading in the newspaper that made the last person leaving turn out the lights. So when it happened here, I had read it a second time. And that time when I read that, I was now a woman who'd had raising my daughter in Airport Heights and had a company in Airport Heights and had already seen all of that stuff happen. So, coming to right now, we're at a time where we're going to see some real challenges ahead. We're going to be looking at some really difficult things coming up. And what I know about the Assembly, having been here for actually 50 years, is how very much citizenship is really brought together to you, and you are in and out of the community council meetings all of the time. It's the Federation that has really helped a lot with each of our community councils in helping us be more effective in understanding what our role is, and that each of the community councils is growing. What we were in the 80s as a community council was very different than where we are now. Airport Heights, completely different community. Wonderful things have happened in that community, and I think more will. We need the Federation, and it's been something that really has been a tool for our neighborhood, and I think for the Assembly as well. So thank you for that item in the budget, and it's a cheap price, I believe, for what we've gotten. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Mr. Flynn, sir.
Well, I just wanted to say hello, Representative Sidna. It's been a long time. It's good to see you again.
Thank
Should have said
you.
hi to Bonnie, too, when she came up. But it's a delight, and thank you for coming down tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
And thank you again, Representative Cisna, for all your years of commitment to the community and to the state on behalf of us. representing us in the legislature. So good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Steele.
How's the school coming?
How's the school?
Yeah, just down the street from you, Airport Heights?
It's down the street. Yes, my husband is a full-time student at UAA. Is that cool? At 74.
Thank you for your service.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say it's good to see you again, my former colleague from the legislature, Sharon. And so I actually had a chat with Sid yesterday, so good to see both of you in the last couple of days.
Great. Good. Thank
Sharon.
you very much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, I'm closing all the public hearings on item 14H, 14I, 14J, 14L, 14M, 14N.
Excuse me.
14O. We're going to have a second public hearing in 2 weeks, ma'am. I can close this public hearing, then we've got the other ones coming up. Public hearings are now closed. There are no special orders. We're down to unfinished agenda. There is none. Audience participation. Is there anybody here that wants to talk to the Assembly for 3 minutes on any issue that's not on our schedule?
Mr. Powers does.
Of course, he's here.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question before Mr. Powers?
What, ma'am?
Why are we postponing 14O instead of taking action on it? That's the mayor's organizational chart.
Because when Mr. Flynn made his motion, we had the public hearing on all those items, and I just closed them all routinely. It'll come up at the next meeting, I think. We'll bring it back up.
Oh, I think Ms. Domboski makes one point that's useful here, Mr. Chairman.
Only one?
Well, one a nice.
We could take action on item 14O.
Well, I think just as you order the agenda for the next meeting, having that precede the other budget documents might be useful.
We can do that.
Okay, so you want to hold it over? Because I don't mind dealing with it
The
tonight.
clerk says it's all right. And I bow to her vast wisdom.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Hello, Billy Ray Powers. How are you, sir?
Billy Ray Powers, UMed District. First time I've been here since we have the new folks on board. Ethan Berkowitz, welcome. Welcome back, Mike Abbott. I don't know the rest of the folks, but we will get to know each other, hopefully. I wanted to say that Mr. Berkowitz, the way you handled the SAP issue with the computer upgrade for the city, I understand that you're doing kind of a hands-on and see this thing get done. You're going to be in there kind of checking it out, understanding it, and that is good leadership. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the summit on any item that's on our schedule?
Mr. Chairman.
Sir?
I just wanted to give a shout out here to our, looks like 5 diehard high school government students who's sticking through. You should get extra credit. Put that on the record.
Mr. Abbott, anything from you, sir?
Excuse me. I'll start and the mayor can weigh in. There were questions earlier about the chief of staff's compensation. We did a little research, thanks to the good folks at ER that were still in their offices. Mr. Baker's salary in 2015 was a little different from the one that he was earning when he was hired into that position. It turns out his salary in 2015 was $121,500. He also was receiving 80 hours of non-cashable leave, and as it turned out, he actually received a severance package, which is something I think somewhat unique, or at least somewhat unusual in municipal service as well. So in terms of a comparison with the current chief of staff, there's a delta of about $2,000 in total compensation, a little less if you include the severance package between the two compensation regimes all in. So that was a question that was asked earlier this evening. We just wanted cleared up as soon as possible, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Assembly comments, and any comments from Assembly members? I am setting a work session up this Friday on the issue we discussed before. It'll be from 11 to 1 o'clock this Friday. Mr. Honeman, I know you've got that look on your face.
Chairman, I'd prefer it. If I can be there, I will try my best to talk to my boss about being able to be there. I'm
Thank
only
you,
one
sir.
working.
Executive sessions there are none. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We're adjourned. Thanks for being here.